The author Kurt Vonnegut once said that science is magic that works. And indeed, this magic is everywhere. In the humble alarm clock that wakes us up, to the life saving drugs and medical devices that have improved the quality of our lives. Advances in science are transforming our world at an incredible pace. The Deens Academy collaborates with reputed scientists to cultivate and promote a scientific temper among students. This year's unusual circumstances did not deter us. With steely determination, supported by our mentors, we forged ahead in our quest to explore science, culminating in today's event, the National Science Day, a celebration of science and women. It has truly been an honor for us D9s to have been guided and mentored by the distinguished scientists Dr. Lavakare and Professor Rohini Godbole.
Dr. P. J. Lavakare, the fabricator of this program, has had immense experience working as the senior advisor for the Institute of International Education in India, Executive Vice President for Manipal Foundation, Executive Director for US Educational Foundation in India, and advisor for the Ministry of Science and Technology. As a scientist, he has an analytical mind and a wide interest in various areas of human life, be it art, music, photography, religion, or spirituality. He loves to spend time with young students and is always looking forward to opportunities to give back to them the benefit of his experience.
Professor Rohini Godbole, a Padma Shri awardee, is an Indian physicist and academic. She is a professor at the Center for High Energy Physics, Indian Institute of Science. She has worked extensively on different aspects of particle phenomena over the past 3 decades. Apart from her work in academics, Professor Godbole is also a much sought after communicator of science, often delivering talks to young students, scholars, and scientists on everything physics. An avid supporter of women pursuing careers in science and technology, Dr. Godbole has recently been awarded the National Order of Merit, considered among the highest distinctions bestowed by France.
Significantly, this year we celebrate women and science. The presence of women in science spans the earliest times of the history of science, wherein they have made significant contributions. Through this event today, we will throw a spotlight on some of the most accomplished women scientists. We will look at their lives, the challenges they faced, and how they conquered them and emerged victorious. We will also examine and analyze the efforts that are being made to encourage women to enter this domain, as well as the impact that scientific progress has had on women. This endeavor of research and learning on women and science has been largely undertaken by students of grades 7, 8, and 9 of both campuses of Deens, supported by faculty over a span of many months. We commence the unraveling of all the marvelous learning with the ceremonial lighting of the lamp, dispelling darkness and illuminating our world with the light of knowledge.
दीवारें ऊंची है, दुनिया है तुम, लंबी डगर है पर हिम्मत है तुम। आओ पिछाले हैं सांसें बुलंद, लड़ने चली हूँ आजादी की जंग।
देखो आजाद है जीना मुझे, देखो आजाद है रहना मुझे, देखो आजाद है जीना मुझे, देखो आजाद है रहना मुझे।
रीति की जंजीरें खा गई जंग, न्याय के मंदिर हो गए भंग। ज़माना चले ना चले मेरे संग, बोलूंगी हल्ला आवाज दबंग।
देखो आजाद है कहना मुझे, देखो आजाद है कहना मुझे, देखो आजाद है कहना मुझे, देखो आजाद है रहना मुझे।
छूटे जिस्म पर मरहम, लाश नहीं हूँ मन जिंदा पतंग। दिल में उम्मीदें और खुशियों के रंग, हर आंसू बनेगा एक नई तरंग। हाँ
देखो आजाद है रहना मुझे, देखो आजाद है रहना मुझे, देखो आजाद है जीना मुझे, देखो आजाद है रहना मुझे।
दीवारें ऊंची है, दुनिया है तंग, लंबी डगर है पर हिम्मत है तंग। आओ पिछाले हैं सांसें बुलंद, लड़ने चली हूँ आजादी की जंग। देखो आजाद है जीना मुझे,
आजाद है जीना मुझे,
आजाद है रहना मुझे,
आजाद है रहना मुझे,
आजाद है जीना
आजाद है जीना मुझे,
आजाद है रहना
आजाद है रहना मुझे,
आजाद है रहना
आजाद है रहना मुझे, देखो आजाद है रहना मुझे, देखो आजाद है जीना मुझे, देखो आजाद है रहना मुझे, देखो आजाद है रहना मुझे, देखो आजाद है रहना
आजाद है जीना मुझे, देखो आजाद है रहना मुझे।
That was a riveting performance by the choir. May I now request our founder principal, Ms. Shanti Menon, to address the gathering.
Thank you, dear. Good morning to you all. We are very happy with the large viewership. Thank you, parents, guests, and children for logging in. Despite the fact the students are working online, they have had an exciting many months launched by our keynote speaker for today, the eminent Professor Rohini Godbole herself. along with the most supportive Professor Lavakare, researching, learning, and working towards putting this event together. While science is a part of our everyday life, in a world which speaks of equal opportunities, women are universally underrepresented in the field of science and technology, with just 30% in the STEM workforce. Deens is a community of opportunities, and it was only appropriate that we open thoughts of our students regarding science and their direct involvement in the same. There are women role models to inspire aspirants in this space, and who best but Professor Rohini Godbole, an epitome of inspiration herself, to be the keynote speaker for today. We are very humbled by her presence with us, and we're completely grateful for her guidance. Jubilant appreciation of Professor Lavakare for his continued engagement and immensely infectious zeal for the mentoring of our students. Thank you both for being here today with our children and for mentoring our team and of faculty. I hope you have a great learning day today.
Thank you for your inspiring words, Shanti ma'am. May I now request Dr. Lavakare to address the gathering.
Thank you very much, Shanti ma'am, for inviting me for this very interesting event. First of all, visitors, parents, and my dear friends from Dean School. I must say this has been an event which started as a project, and it has become a big event for the whole school. And for that, I have to be thankful to the entire group of the Dean family, particularly the students, the teachers, the administrators, and of course, the person, the spirit behind it has been Shanti ma'am. Without her, she never gave up. There were times when we were having difficulties, but she said we'll go through it. So I think what you see today in this exhibition is going to be a culmination of something which was started as a small seed in a flower pot, and become a big garden of flowers. All this has happened within 1.5 years or almost 2 years. What I'm going to do really is to trace a little history for you for this event, to see how it started, how it became so important, and where are we today, what difficulties we went through. It all started when I came to Bangalore, maybe 2 years ago, and I said I want to interact with some school, and Shanti ma'am invited me. She said, okay, you go and address the students and let us see what their reaction is. So I went and addressed a group of students, talked on a topic of science, popularized very popular science is astronomy, asking them about what's the life in the universe and things like that. And I was amazed and surprised at the interest and the curiosity shown by the students, which really triggered the whole event. So what I decided to do is tell you a little history about the whole event, how it happened, how it started, how it has come to the present stage, and where we are today, where we will go today onwards. Actually, when I came to Bangalore, I've always been interested in students, so I came to the Dean School, which is closest to my residence, and I talked to the principal, Shanti ma'am, and said, I want to interact with students. Can you do something? So she said, why don't you address the students on a topic of science and let us see what their reaction is. So that's what I did. I gave a talk to the students on a very interesting topic about science, astronomy, universe, the world, and so on, stars, and things like that. And when, after my talk, I sort of got lots of questions from students, and I could see that I had somehow triggered their curiosity. So that's when an idea came to my mind, and I asked them, how many of you would like to work on a project which really shows the impact of science on society, what science is doing, what are the wonders of science, and so on and so forth. And sure enough, lots of hands were raised. And many of them offered to say, we would like to work on this project. I said, it's going to be hard work. And they said, yes, we would like to work on this. To make sure that this will go on, I asked the students to give their names to the teachers. Because very often you say you want to do and you don't go ahead. But I was again surprised that I got large number of names, and Priya ma'am told me that there are plenty of names and we have to do something about it now. And that's how we started. I had to take help from some of my scientist friends who told me that we will be happy to join you and let's work on this project. So we took a project which is a national project in a way, and all institutions are expected to take part in it. So Deens Academy decided to take part in this event, which is called the National Science Day. The National Science Day 2020 was to be done in February 2020. And we were right now in October 2019, which means we had few months to get all our act together. But I must say the amount of effort put in by the students, by the teachers, was really exciting and very, very supportive. At this stage, I want to particularly thank two teachers who have done a marvelous job in managing the whole event. One is, of course, Priya Jacob, who has managed all the events, programs, timing, schedules so beautifully. And second is Sunita Nair, who in fact taught me some of the aspects relating to biology, life sciences, agriculture, and so on. So it was also a learning experience from me, learning how teachers teach the students and how they learn. So we decided to involve the teachers in a big way, and the first exhibition was put up on 27th of February or 28th of February. 28th of February is Science Day. And we gave importance of Science Day. What is Science Day? Students did all this. In 10 booths, we depicted various aspects of science. Its excitement, its applications, its use, why we celebrate National Science Day, and so on. So this first National Science celebration of the Deens Academy was really something which I had not expected. So did my colleagues. They said it really has gone off very well, and those of you who are interested, I'm sure, can get the videos of this from the school and have a look at it later on. Having had this success in February 2020, already the students were excited and started talking about the event for 2021. And that is where I decided that I'll be an online student of Deens Academy. And that online student of Deens Academy gave me a feeling of being with the students. And that made all the change in the way I enjoyed the event. I was working with them. I was not only just mentoring with them, with working them together. And at the same time, we built up another concept, which I think very often is missing amongst the students. And that is the concept of working in a team, working with a leader, following the leader, managing everything. And the students in each of the booths did an excellent job with the managers, their technical team, and all of the exhibition really went off very well. Large number of visitors came, and we were really excited now that 2021 will be another major event we can organize. Theme chosen came up also to the discussion with students and Shanti ma'am, and theme chosen was Women and Science. So that was the theme which is now being shown to you in the 2021 National Science Day. I must say here, one student I must identify, that is Jivita. She was the one who took so much interest in the whole project that she was pushing me rather than I was pushing the students. She got all the students together, got their names, how they like to work on, divided various topics and things like that. And Jivita's excitement really was so conducive that the teachers and many others joined in the effort, and we came with a certain plan. Having come up to the stage, that's when the calamity came, the pandemic. It was around March that we were just full of excitement of the exhibition we had completed, and now this 21 exhibition which we wanted to plan had come up with the obstacle of pandemic COVID. How can we have people together? How can we have students coming together? It was very difficult. So we didn't know what to do and we were at loss. And then came the usual leadership, positive approach to the whole exam from Shanti ma'am. She said, doesn't matter. We'll manage in a contingency plan. live exhibition as well as online exhibition. Unfortunately, today you're going to be able to see the online exhibition, which has been organized by the students and the school teachers, mainly by the students and the teachers. This is one aspect which I enjoyed, that not only could we encourage the students, but the teachers also got so enthused that they become the leaders. And I must say, for this exhibition, the mentors are not the scientists, but the mentors have been the teachers. Each of the two campuses worked together, coordinated well, and so well that we are able to present this exhibition to you today. So I want to thank Deens Academy for giving me this opportunity. I have enjoyed these 2 years exceedingly well, and I must say, I must compliment the authorities for everyone including. And the teachers have been the real driving spirit. Shanti ma'am has been the leader, leading the team, and the students have been excellent participants. So dear visitors and parents, I hope you'll enjoy this exhibition, which really is an effort to bring out a very important issue of women in science. I don't want to say much on the topic because you already have a very distinguished speaker in Professor Rohini Godbole, who is going to talk about this subject. So, with all these few words, thank you very much for giving me this opportunity and enjoy this exhibition, Women and Science. Thank you.
Thank you for your enriching words, Dr. Lavakare. We are truly privileged to have been mentored by you. May I now request Professor Rohini Godbole to deliver the keynote address.
My dear friends, it's with great pleasure today that I have this conversation with you on women in physics and mathematics on the occasion of Science Day. I am truly glad that you students have decided to celebrate women in science and make that as a theme of your study, of your discussions on this National Science Day. And because you're talking about women in science, I decided to tell you some stories about women in the 20th century or 19th century, from 19th and 20th century, or even before, in physics and mathematics. So, what is the plan? The plan is very simple. I'm going to talk to you about inspiring stories of women in physics and mathematics, beginning from very early history up to the middle of the 20th century. But of course, there is no free lunch. So, after the stories, I might like to tell you what is it that we learn from these stories. And then I would like to sort of spend maybe 10 minutes on telling you what is the story in India now and what can we all do to change the situation such that you people will see a different tomorrow. So, in general, one should ask, why you people are doing it already, so you're aware. But let me just kind of begin by saying that the number of women who do science is quite small the world over. And, generally people ask, is it necessarily bad? I mean, what's so wrong with it? The point is that it is certainly not the best use of humanity's intellectual potential. And a bigger diversity can only be good for science as it is good for any creative activity like painting, like art, like poetry, and what have you. Further, the changing economic conditions actually mean that at least in India, the number of women who participate in science is keep on going to increase. And therefore, it is very important to discuss in general, like you are discussing, what efforts will make this participation more efficient and more effective. So indeed, this is the reason why one discusses the question or issue of women in science. But then why did I decide to choose and focus on physics and mathematics? The reason, it's really clear that we are a long, long way from gender equity, that is having equitable representation of women in science. And the number of women who practice science, who do research in science, and who lead scientific research these numbers are small in all disciplines. But some subjects are more unequal than others. That is, the numbers are even smaller in physics and maths generally compared to the other disciplines. And in fact, there have been, maybe 10 years ago, people like Harvard president Larry Summers, who kind of thought that women lack capability in mathematical and physical sciences. And as a result of that, this became quite a subject of discussion all over the world about generally looking at women's participation in physics and mathematics research. Now, just to kind of begin at the beginning, you know, you can kind of, I begin with this photograph, and this is a very famous photograph of people who attended a rather famous conference called Solvay Conference in 1927. Any one of you guys who can Google can look at this. What was so special about this conference? In this conference, there were all the architects of the 20th century physics as it goes, modern physics as some of you might learn in your 10th and 11th, and later on, any of you who do some physics will learn many of the names that are there in this photograph. Let me tell you that almost all the people in this photograph are Nobel laureates. And just to begin with, here in the corner, you can see the young Albert Einstein. Okay, and in this gallery, stellar gallery of Nobel laureates and very intelligent physicists who structured the physics of the 20th century, there is this one woman, and that is Madame Marie Curie. So this was the story. In 1927, Madame Marie Curie, in fact, had got 2 Nobel Prizes, as some of you might know, one in 1903 and another in 1911. Then, however, for the second woman to win the Nobel Prize, world had to wait till 1963, where Maria Goeppert-Mayer won the Nobel Prize for nuclear physics, and that's her in this picture that I have shown. I will talk about her later, also about Madame Marie Curie. After that second Nobel Prize in 1963 for a woman in physics, again, physics had to wait for a very, very long time till Donna Strickland. She is a laser physicist who got this in 2018. And just last year, Andrea Ghez, an astronomer, got the Nobel Prize. So this is the gallery of 4 Nobel Prize winning women in physics. This is Madame Marie Curie at the left. Then it is Maria Goeppert-Mayer, about whom I told you. Then it is Donna Strickland, who got it in 2018. And then there is Andrea Ghez, who got it in 2020. And how many total Nobel Prizes in physics were given? The total number of people who got Nobel Prize, because sometimes people share Nobel Prize in physics in the same year, like Andrea Ghez shared with 2 other men. So out of this total 218 Nobel Prize winners, only 4 are women. So that tells you that women have been in rather small numbers achieving this very super high honor in physics. In fact, there are some whom the Nobel Foundation missed. I will talk to you about them also. And they are from the earlier centuries. Lisa Meitner, who was born in 1878 and who passed away in 1968. And Madame C.S. Wu, who was from the next century, who was born in 1912 and passed away in 1997. I will talk to you about both these women. And last but not the least, since I'm talking of physics and mathematics, let me tell you that in mathematics, there is only one woman so far who has won the top maths prize, and that's the equivalent of the Nobel Prize. And in mathematics, that is called the Fields Medal. And she, the Maryam Mirzakhani, an Iranian by birth, but who spent her time doing mathematics. She went to do her PhD to the US and then stayed there later on. And she was born in 1977 and died a very untimely death in 2017. But luckily, she got the Nobel Prize before cancer took her away from us, and that was in 2014. So, what I am trying to show you here is that the number of women who have got the top prize, as it were, in physics and mathematics have been indeed very, very few. And therefore, to some extent, one wanted to discuss and list the women who have made very important contributions to mathematics and physics. What I mean by that is that the number of women who got these top prizes have been very few, but that does not mean that women have not made extremely important and significant contributions to the subject of physics and mathematics. And therefore, it is my attempt today to try and connect with you and tell you a few stories about women who really made very important contributions to these subjects. And where do I begin? Okay, before I tell you where I begin, I have in the next few slides, and the slides can stay with you. So I have given the resources from where I got some information. I have been, studying this whole thing for over the years. So therefore, I have information from various different sources. But right now, here I am listing few sites where you can go and look for information in case you are interested in knowing more. So there are these 2 pages of references. Then, in particular, I have also sometimes I will refer to a report that I myself wrote on women scientists in India, and then also an article which I wrote in 2017 in Current Science. So I have given you all these references in case you would like to look at this later. So where do I begin? As I said, I begin from women in science from the Greek times. So the first example that we actually have historically is that of a lady called Hypatia. And she is certainly one of the earliest known women mathematicians. She lived maybe from 350 to 415 or 370 to 416. We don't know. But what we do know that she was the daughter of a person called Theon, who was actually the last known member, the librarian of the Library of Alexandria. Now, in this world of Google, where you have information on the tip of your fingers, more information than you can handle, perhaps you don't appreciate the role of libraries and particularly librarians. The librarians in these times were actually scholars themselves. And Theon, who happened to be the librarian of the library in Alexandria, actually taught his daughter, trained his daughter in logic, in mathematics. And in fact, she wrote commentaries of classic mathematical works and actually lectured to students. She was also a philosopher. Unfortunately, as you can see, she also most probably died, if the history is right, somewhat young, but she was killed in some one uprising. So this is the first known woman, and since she created commentaries of the classic mathematical works, I have listed her in mathematics. Were there any Indian woman mathematician? In the 12th century India, I hope you know, mathematics in India was really flourishing. And an extremely important treatise on arithmetic was written by a very famous mathematician called Bhaskara II. One copy of this original manuscript now actually lies in Courant Institute in the US, in New York. And this book is called Lilavati. And in this book, he gives a lot of problems, and he explains mathematics, arithmetic, related in terms of these problems. And he addresses these problems to Lilavati. And this book is supposed to be dated 1150. So, for example, I have just translated one of these couplets, a problem which says, "Fawn-eyed child Lilavati, tell me, how much is the number resulting from 135 multiplied by 12 if you understand multiplication by separate parts and by separate digits? And tell me, beautiful one, how much is that product divided by the same multiplier?" Many of you will say, hey, this is so simple. We can just punch these numbers in our calculator and we can get it. But remember, this is written in 1150. And since he talked to her and gave these problems to her, the legend at least has it that Leelavati was perhaps the first mathematician in India, woman mathematician. So the book contains many, many problems as verses, and they are often illustrated. I have taken here the photograph of the original, of the handwritten Bhurjapatra copy, and you can see there is a scale here. I hope you can see the scale here. So that tells you the size, that this page is only 6 centimeter long, and in this rather 6 inches long, I'm very sorry, 6 inches long. And here this is a problem, and the problem is that this peacock is standing on the top of a tree, and the peacock can fly at a particular speed. The snake is moving under the tree again at a particular speed, and the person is supposed to it's given perhaps the height of the tree and is asked when will the peacock catch the snake. So this is what this is, and if you realize here in the right hand triangle, this is really the Pythagoras theorem that has to be used here to solve the problem. So this is again something that some of you may know in your school studies. Now I move from immediately, so as you can see, I moved first from 300 to 1150, and from 1150 now I'm moving directly to 17th century. These are the few pieces of information that we have. And the first woman PhD from University of Padua, I don't know how many of you know it, but University of Padua was actually the university where Galileo was present. So this is a very venerated, very, very old university. And she was the first woman PhD who got her PhD in 1678. What I have reproduced here is a cover of a book which she wrote. And this book was again her commentary and translation from Latin to Italian. And please see here, Elena Laurencia Coronaro Piscopia, that is her name. And this is these are her memories that have been written by Margaret Alec. And what she said very interestingly, so she was born in 1646 and she died in 1684. And it was very interesting. She actually wanted to study theology, because at that time, the highest branch of knowledge was actually theology. But then she was told that, you're a woman. Women cannot study such high things. Maybe you should study philosophy. And as luck would have it, she studied mathematics, and she actually translated the works of Aristotle into Italian. So, as I said, she was the first woman PhD. Now, when we come to the next century, there are even more. Now the women who did mathematics or physics start increasing more rapidly. So in the 18th century, I have given you, I hope you realize that 18th century means time between women who were born in 1700 something. So here I have listed 6 women, all of whom were born between 1706 to 1750. And there are 3 that I have written in green. So I will not talk about them, not because they are not important, but we really have a finite amount of time. But I will talk about these 3 women: Sophie Germain, who was born in 1776, and Mary Somerville, who was born in 1780, and Caroline Herschel, who was born in 1750. So let's begin. Other 3 women, all 3 were actually mathematicians. And Caroline Herschel is the only physicist in this list. Mary Somerville is somewhere in between physics and mathematics. So let's see. Sophie Germain's story is absolutely interesting. She was born, as I said, 1776. If you people have studied any history, I don't know what you study these days and what that grade, you will realize that by the time Sophie was about, young Sophie, which was 11 or 12 years old, was the time when the French Revolution took place. And her father was a scholar as well as some perhaps a landowner, which I don't know exactly, but he was a well-to-do person. And they moved away from Paris, where the difficult times were had by all. And she taught herself from the books that her father had collected, because he was a scholar in during this time when they were all basically confined to the houses. And that is where she started learning. And when she read about Aristotle, how he was working out things in mathematics at the moment when he was killed on the battlefield, she was totally thrilled with mathematics stories, and she wanted to learn mathematics. But the point was that people felt that it was not proper for a middle class girl to study mathematics and science. As a result of which, she never got really formal training. In fact, the year she started studying, right after the revolution, Ecole Polytechnique, which is one of the biggest and most important institute of higher education in Paris, actually was opened, but women were not allowed there. So she actually used to use a pen name of a friend and a cousin, and used to study things from his cousin's notes. And she would then communicate and solve problems and communicate with rather big names in mathematics. Again, I don't know how many of you would know these names, but Lagrange and Gauss are. Lagrange was a French mathematician, Gauss was a German mathematician, and these people were the architects of the physics and mathematics of the 18th century, in fact. And Sophie did actually very important work on theory of elasticity, and a very famous theorem called Fermat's last theorem. That Fermat's last theorem was actually solved only in the last decade by a mathematician who actually won Fields Medal for that. So, but Sophie Germain, who was not for a long time even allowed to study mathematics, has made very important contributions towards solving this theorem. And she was the first woman who won a prize from the French Academy. Those days, the academies would announce prizes, and where you had to solve a problem, and they would look at different solutions to the problem, and the best solution would get the get the award. But in her case, the mathematician examiners kind of said this answer is correct, but the thing needs to be proved more formally. You know, mathematicians are very rigorous. This has to be done more rigorously. And she had to do it all over again for the simple reason that she had no formal training. Now, here, what I want to show you is that here is a woman who had immense application, immensely intelligent, and she made important contributions to the mathematics in spite of the fact that she didn't receive any formal training. And maybe if she had studied formally, maybe, mathematics would have been much the richer for that. In fact, I want to quote a statement from Gauss, the great mathematician. He used to be called the prince of mathematicians, by the way. And he tried much later in his life, and Sophie Germain's life, which was not a very long one, as you can see. She lived only for 50 years, 55 years. So he was trying to get her honorary doctorate from University of Erlangen or Göttingen, I don't remember which one. But then he says what used to happen is that she used to communicate with him as a man in a man's name. And then finally, one day, she met him. And then he says, how can I describe my astonishment and admiration on seeing my esteemed correspondent, M. Leblanc, metamorphosed into this celebrated person? And then he goes on to say, when a woman, because of her sex, our customs and prejudices, encounters infinitely more obstacles than men in familiarizing herself with knotty problems. And then he goes on to say something further. And then he continues, in such situation, Germain proved to the world that even a woman can accomplish something worthwhile in the most rigorous and the abstract of the sciences, and for that reason would well have deserved an honorary degree. I think this is an extremely inspiring story, and I wanted to tell you that. Then the next story is that of Mary Somerville, who was born in 1780. Actually, very close to Sophie Germain. She actually was drawn to mathematics by equations which were appearing in a fashion magazine. Her father actually was opposed to studying science and he got her married at a young age, but her first husband died. And as a result, and after that, she married a second husband, and he so proved to be extremely supportive. She was also supported by very famous scientists at that time, Charles Babbage, who invented the computer. I hope some of you would know that, and Herschel, who was a royal astronomer at that time. And she actually translated books by famous mathematicians like Laplace, who had derived the mathematics which described the motion of all planets in our planetary system. And she made a commentary on that. That means that she actually added her own thoughts. So it's not just translation. And actually, her work and her books inspired the person who actually found Neptune by studying the orbits of planets. She was the first honorary member of the Royal Astronomical Society, and indeed, she was a woman of science because she defined the process of science. So this is Mary Somerville for you. And today, in fact, actually in University of Oxford, there is a Somerville College named after her. Then there is Caroline Herschel, who was born, as you can see, now we are coming further away, not so much further away. She was born in 1750, and she lived to be she had a long, long life. She was a sister of the astronomer William Herschel, and she had first come to England to help her brother keep house. But then she started helping him in polishing the mirrors, and after that she started making her own observations. She's actually credited with observing various new nebula and clusters and comets. So she actually, her brother actually was very impressed with her, was very supportive of her, and then he asked the king to pay his assistant. And because of her work, she was also got the gold medal of Royal Astronomical Society. So she is the first woman physicist, if you wish. Not if you wish, indeed. Then we come now to 19th and 20th century, and now we see the list is becoming bigger and bigger. And now I have listed here a few names, about 9 names, and only 2 of them I have put in green. Unfortunately, again, I don't have time. I don't know how much more time I can spend on each one of these women, but I want to go and tell you a little bit more about some of these. The first 2 women are Ada Lovelace and Sofia Kowalska. Then I will talk about Marie Curie, Amy Noether, and these 3 names I've already told you. So let's go one by one through these. So Ada Lovelace. She actually had a very, very short life. She was born in 1815 and she died in 1852. But she was encouraged by her mother to study, and she was tutored by Mary Somerville. So just see how it helps to have other women around. She actually had a lot of interactions with the computer scientist Babbage, and he encouraged her to write a commentary on an article by an Italian scientist called Luigi Menabrea. And he had written an article on the so-called analytical machine, which was proposed by Babbage. That was really a computer. And her comment on Luigi Menabrea's article actually contained the first algorithm. And so you see that now computers, algorithms have become so very big and an incredible, indelible, part of our life. But it was one woman, Ada Lovelace, who wrote the first algorithm. Then comes Sofia Kowalska. She was born in 1850, and again, you see, she lived only for 41 years. You can see the bright eyes in this photograph. And she actually is very interesting. She was born in a very rich landlord family, and she was taught at home till she was 15 or so, and she loved mathematics. So she got into a marriage of convenience with a cousin, so that after marriage they could both leave Russia. And then they decided that once they reach Europe, they will separate, which is what they did. And then she did very important work on differential equations. And her mentor was a very famous mathematician called Weierstrass. And Sofia Kowalska became the first professor in mathematics in Europe at the University of Uppsala. She also was the first woman winner of a prize. As I said, in those days in mathematics, they used to have these prizes, and she was one of the first winners, woman winner of this prize. But in the day she won this prize, she wrote in her diary, "I'm as miserable as a dog. No, I hope for their sake that the dogs cannot be as unhappy as human creatures, especially as women." This means that this lady had to pay a very heavy price for at making the intellectual achievements that she made in her personal life. So this is Sofia Kowalska. Then comes Marie Curie. Marie Curie was the scientist par excellence, man or woman. She won 2 Nobel Prizes. She won one Nobel Prize with her daughter. She won one Nobel Prize with her husband. I mean, you talk of records, and she has set them. But this woman had a very demanding life, and she was a very determined woman. And she said this: "Life is not very easy for any of us. But what of that? We must have perseverance. And above all, we must have confidence in ourselves. We must believe that we are gifted for something, and that must be attained." And it's funny to tell you that she got her position. She was a professor in the University of Paris, but she got her position only after the accidental death of her husband, Pierre Curie, who, luckily for her, never failed to emphasize her contribution. And this is, as I said, the ultimate shining example of a woman scientist. And you realize that all the, for example, Marie Curie was one of the first women who were allowed to study in Paris in a college. Okay. I will come to more and more such stories. There is this Lisa Meitner, about whom I talked to you. She studied in Vienna, and she was the first woman who was allowed to, she started studying at the university when she was one of the first batch of women students who could study at a university. And then she got her degree. And she's the one who actually coined the word fission and explained the physics of the fission process, which is what is used both in a nuclear bomb and a nuclear power plant. She was a mathematician, theorist, and she calculated the energy release as well as what would be the distribution of the daughter nuclei that get formed in the fission process. And she suggested experiments to Hahn, who was a lifelong collaborator. And in fact, he got a Nobel Prize for that. And even the postcard on which she suggested the experiment is in existence. But unfortunately, the Jewish religion and the gender discrimination seem to have played a role in her not getting a Nobel Prize. And I must say that even I, as a student in physics in the early days of my life, did not realize the importance of her role in understanding the process of fission. So that just goes to show how we teach our science also. Then comes the next story of Maria Gopart-Mayer, about who I told you. And she was a theoretical nuclear physicist, and her calculations for 2-photon transitions in her thesis have been verified only very recently using laser physics. But her Nobel Prize is for something called shell model of nuclei, which was an extremely important step in understanding nuclear structure. But believe it or not, she got her Nobel Prize in 1963, but till 1960, she didn't have a permanent job. And the reason was that according to the so-called nepotism rules, people didn't want to give the husband and wife job at the same place. And her husband happened to be a very good solid-state physicist. So he had a job, whereas she did not have a permanent job till 1960. So this sort of, and I just think how many times husbands or brothers or fathers or fathers and sons were not allowed to have job in the same institute. That was never there, but only for husband and wife, they sort of used this rule that relatives should not be in the same department with a job. Then comes the story of C.S. Wu. Now, as you can see, I'm coming much closer to the present times. And this is where I'm going to stop my stories, because I don't want to talk about women physicists or mathematicians. I don't want to talk too much about women mathematics and physicists who are still around. That's why I'm not going to spend time discussing it, not because it's not important, but I've just set myself a sort of distinction in that. She was a student who came from China, and she didn't study join the University of Michigan because she found that women were not allowed to use the front door. I mean, just imagine what kind of challenges these women faced. And she performed an experiment which actually proved violation of a very important conservation principle in nuclear beta decay. And it actually led to what is called now the standard model of particle physics. And there is a lot of discussion and justification why she did not get the Nobel. But in my take is she really deserved it. But luckily she was feted and honored and respected otherwise in a big way. And I've shown her here in her lab where she did a very intricate experiment which proved this parity violation. Then I come to the story of a great mathematician of 19th century, actually 19th and 20th. She lived on the cusp. She was born in 1882 and she passed away in 1935. Again, didn't live very long. And she was called a creative genius by Albert Einstein. She did enormously important work, which is underneath all the theoretical physics of the 20th century. And actually, she contributed very fundamentally to pure mathematics as well. But again, she could not get a degree for a long time because women were not allowed in the university, just like Lisa Meitner. She was the first woman to get a degree from University of Erlangen. But after she got her PhD, she could not get a paid teaching position for 7 years after PhD. And in this time, she was working at University of Göttingen as an assistant to Hilbert. And Hilbert is again a very famous mathematical physicist, and she was teaching his classes. And she gave a talk and giving a talk at the International Mathematical Congress is extremely prestigious. And she was one of the first women who ever gave this kind of talk. And she didn't even have a permanent position at that time. Her contributions to physics and mathematics are extremely fundamental. And in fact, in an exhibition on 20th century men of mathematics, she was the one woman who was included, even if they were men of mathematics. That is kind of recognizing her contribution to mathematics. And what is interesting is that Charles Agnes Scott, whose name I showed you earlier, herself was a mathematician, actually created funds for Emmy Noether to come to the US when the Nazi rulers started making it difficult and removed her job. That time she came to a Bryn Mawr College in the US. It's a women's college. And she used to travel to Princeton University to give lectures where Einstein was in the audience. In spite of Albert Einstein's best efforts, she couldn't get a job in Princeton University. She was immensely successful as a researcher, as a teacher. She actually had a group of people, her students, they used to be called Noether boys and Noether girls, and all of them made extremely important contributions to the subject of abstract mathematics. And she had support from her family in all her life. For example, for the 7 long years when she didn't have a job, her father and her brother supported her financially so that she could continue her mathematics. In fact, in 2017, the March issue of a book, thing called a magazine brought out by Indian Physics Association called Physics News, we had an article on her. And I would be happy if some time you get a chance, and this is available online, you can look at the article on her. And also all the other articles in this Physics News are written by women only. I cannot complete this talk again without a discussion of side by side of Emmy Noether and also Emmy Noether and Mariam Mirzakhani. As I have seen here, shown you here, Amy Noether lived from 1882 to 1935, the first woman to be allowed in the University of Erlangen to get a PhD. And she got the Ackermann Teubner Memorial Prize in 1932, which was again something very special. And the first time a woman got this. And this is when she gave her talk at the International Mathematics Congress. And then there is this Maria Mirzakhani, who was a young student winning Olympiads as a young student in Iran. And then she moved to the US and did totally fundamental work for which she was awarded the Fields Medal. I want to sort of end this with giving you a story of a mathematician who actually worked in ecology. So she was the mother of a subject which is now called mathematical ecology. But what is interesting? Okay, first thing, her name is Pilou, Pileou. And what is interesting is that she did all her research from home by herself, submitted to University of London. She was born in 1924 and she got her first university job in 1968. So you can calculate for yourself that she was 46 years old when she got her first job. And she started the subject of mathematical ecology, which is actually the subject of how do you model nature's systems. Okay. And I just want to quote a very interesting story about her. She got the Eminent Ecologist Award in 1986. She was extremely successful, revered, and honored. And she began her life in science, as it were, by writing a paper showing that a very eminent ecologist called Robert MacArthur was wrong. Actually, Robert MacArthur got the Eminent Ecology Award before her, 2 years before her. So she had written an article called Corrections to the MacArthur Formula for Abundance of Species. So I reproduce here her article here. This is the 1966. She wrote this paper. Note here that she was 44 at that time, but that was the beginning of her life in science. And this is Pilou, and she wrote this paper. And to this paper, our friend Robert MacArthur wrote a note called Note on Mrs. Pilou's Comments. So he doesn't call Dr. Pilou or Professor Pilou. He calls her Mrs. Pilou. And he says that I am happy to agree that her formula is literally correct. And what she had really pointed out, that there was a conceptual error in Robert MacArthur's formula. As luck would have it, under certain approximation, that was a correct formula. And she even showed why his formula worked, but why there was a conceptual mistake in it. And Mr. MacArthur, who was also himself a great ecologist, was completely unhappy. And therefore, he said that let us hope that her comments do not draw additional attention to what is now an absolute approach to community ecology. We should be allowed to die a natural death. So he understands that he was wrong, and he wants to be forgotten, but he doesn't like the point that this lady has actually pointed out that he had made a mistake. Then I come to 19th and 20th century US, and here there is a story of 4 women, 3 African American and 1 white American. And these women actually are Katherine Johnson, Dorothy Vaughan, and Mary Jackson. And this is Mary Singong. And these 3 women, for example, there is a film and a book called Hidden Figures. I would recommend all of you to go and read this book. I don't have time to describe their achievements, but all I want to tell you is that these were the women who had double discrimination against them. They were women in a man's field. She is the first Black African American engineer, and she was a computer programmer, and she was a mathematician. And she did the calculations which put Apollo into orbits, which calculated the orbits of the Apollo machine, which actually took people to the moon. So these are the hidden figures. Now, what is one thing that one can learn from all of them? They were all supremely confident of their science and they enjoyed it. But they needed the support of a mentor. And the attitude of the community is not always helpful for women to conduct a career in science. That's why I told you the story of below. And however, this is more sociological than can be academic. The academia normally bows to supreme scientific achievements, but sociological biases do lead to illogical obstacles, like they led to obstacles in Sophie Germain's path. And it is to be imagined that this can be a major cause for many women who don't either participate in science or continue in science. Further, even if the academic achievements were appreciated, there still seemed to be a bias in recognitions and awards coming women's way. Most of the women remained single or they were married to fellow scientists in most cases, not always. What happens in India? We see these kinds of pictures, women in technology, ISRO landing on the Chandrayaan landing on the Mars mission. These are the women who took part in these projects, who led these projects. But does that mean that we have lots of women in mathematics and physics? So, in fact, in modern day India, I would take only women physicists of note from period of 1930 to 1960. I don't want to go beyond that. And I can only think right now of women physicists and mathematicians of repute, only 6 or 7 of them in this period. And uh, I will maybe I will, if I'm left with time, I'm running out of time, so I do not know how much I will discuss it in more detail, these women. But what is true in India is that women are not perceived as being incapable of intellectual achievements, that is, in studying mathematics and science. Many of the Nobel University Prize winners in science are women. We don't have our Larry Summers, but we still don't have a large number of women who do science. So the summary is that the presence of women students in school and colleges is high. Their level of achievement is high, but the participation of women in research in India is rather low. The presence of women who lead projects, who are in leadership positions, that's also rather small. And there are serious leakages in the pipeline from college to university to scientific career. So this is the same thing said all over again. So I will not belabor this point. So what can we do? We decided that we will make, available stories of women scientists from India, and all the 5 names that I put on the earlier slide are actually, the stories are contained in a book called Lilavati's Daughters. In 2005, we brought this book out. By we, I mean that myself and my colleague, Professor Ram Ramaswamy, and we published it on behalf of the Indian Academy of Sciences. And the idea was that we brought out the stories of women scientists who trained or worked in independent India. And because we knew Lilavati and the Lilavati's legend, we called this book Lilavati's Daughters. And these are the role models that I would like you, these and many more, that I would like to pay attention to. So this is this book, which is available from the Indian Academy of Sciences. And in addition to that, we have also brought out a smaller book, which might be more appropriate to the many of you. And this is a book called The Girl's Guide to Life in Science. I would like to recommend it to all, not just girls, boys and girls, to read this book, because this book gives you the stories of 25 women scientists of India who also what science they did and where is the area of science in which they work is moving onwards. So if you get your chance in your hands, these books are available, in fact, as an ebook from Zuban publication. So from my book, Lilavati's Daughters, I wanted to tell you maybe 4 or 5 stories and end this thing. So the first story in my book is from a woman who was born in 1865. Please remember, the first women who got admission to university to do their degree in Europe, like Lisa Meitner, also came from similar time, also was born in similar time. Now, of course, here we are not talking of somebody who did a PhD, but Anandibai Joshi, she was the first woman, Hindu woman, and it is called Hindu because the other one was Parsi. She was the first Hindu woman to obtain a medical degree in the US at the University of Pennsylvania. And imagine this girl, I would call her girl, at the age of 12, didn't even know how to read or write, even Marathi, which was her mother tongue. And by the age of 18, she actually traveled to the US, knowing very good English, Marathi, Sanskrit, as well as Bengali, because her husband was posted in Kolkata. And she went there, she did her medical degree. She came back at the age of 21 and she contracted TB, and therefore, unfortunately, she died at the age of 22. But this is the inspirational woman who achieved something. And you know why she did? She did a thesis on gynecological problems of women, Hindu women in India. And the reason she did that is because she had lost her own child at the age of 14. So this is the story that I would like you to see. Then one of the first woman founder fellow of the Indian Academy of Sciences and a very, very accomplished woman scientist who was a Padma Shri is a renowned botanist and plant cytologist called Janaki Amal. And she made extremely significant contributions to genetics. She was the first Director General of the Zoological Survey of India. And she actually chose to remain single to be able to dedicate herself to science. Then there was Anna Mani, who was also, she worked with India's only Nobel Prize winner in physics, namely C.V. Raman. And she was a deputy director of the meteorological department. She was also the director general of observatories in Delhi. Then Purnima Sinha, she is the first woman PhD in physics, and her advisor was Satyendranath Bose. And she worked in Central Glass and Ceramic Research Institutes, and her daughters and her nieces, all of whom I happen to know, are very successful and eminent physicists themselves. So here there is Purnima Sinha with Satyendranath Bose. Then Bimla Bhutti, she did her PhD in 1962 with another Nobel Prize Nobel laureate, S. Chandrasekhar. And she was really very successful plasma physicist. She was a fellow of the Indian National Science Academy. She was the fellow of National Academy of Sciences, India. She was the fellow of the World Academy of Sciences. She was a president of a particular commission of Indian Astronomical Union. That tells you what kind of international respect and recognition she had. And she also chose actually to remain single to be able to concentrate on her science. And then there is this interesting story of R.J. Hans Gill. She's a mathematician. She is in the University of Chandigarh. She is fellow of all the academies of sciences as well as the World Academy of Science. And you know, she dressed as a boy so she could go to a school where, because otherwise she couldn't study mathematics. So these are the stories of women physicists and women mathematicians. As I said, I wanted to continue only till women who got their PhDs in the 1960s, because after that it comes so too close to home. That is, I myself got my PhD in 1979. So what were the common themes of all these women in my book called Lilavati's Daughters? They all said that they had support from their parents and their parents-in-law. They had strong role models in schools and colleges, and they had help during early career, especially while raising children. And they always had mentors who were senior colleagues. But they all mentioned that if the chance played a very important role, and what we would like to think, and that is what we have to try, all of us have to try and think, how to remove chance from this list of helping factors. If we can remove that chance from this list so that women do a PhD, do not leave after that, or who contribute to science in leadership positions, in doing cutting edge research, we have to remove somehow this chance, element of chance from this. So what has been happening Indian Academy of Sciences has a Women in Science panel. Then Indian National Science Academy actually has brought out a report called Examination of Indian Women's Access and Retention to Scientific Careers. Major policy changes are happening. Lot of these discussions are happening. The Science and Technology Innovation Policy 2020 actually has introduced many measures so that one can increase the number of women, one can achieve gender equity in science. The Department of Science and Technology tries to take special steps so that the number of students, women students in IITs can increase, so on and so forth. Many things are happening, but my own personal remark is that we just need to provide a level playing field for women, and the rest will take care of itself. So let me just say the following, that basically consideration of how to increase the number of women in science need to be always in the minds of powers that be, and not just restricted to days like International Day for Women and Girls in Science, which is 11th February, or Science Day, like today we are discussing, or International Women's Day, which will be 8th of March. We should do it on all the other days as well. Only when we do that, then and only then, we can come up with solutions which will work for us in India. And then a day will come when we will just speak of scientists and engineers and not their gender. I would love to be known as a scientist and not as a woman scientist. And the way to achieve this, surprisingly, goes through the path of being aware of the gender and the gender gap for a long time. By the way, I should tell you that Donna Strickland actually always said that she doesn't think of herself as a woman in science. She thinks of herself as a scientist. And I think she talks for all of us who do science, all women who are in science. We would first like to be known as scientists, and we would like to be thought as scientists who happen to be women. And that is the day, that is the aim where we want to go. And I hope that you people are the architect of a world in which a woman scientist will be a scientist who happens to be a woman rather than a woman who happens to be a scientist. Thank you very much for bearing with me. And I wish you all the luck in whatever you want to do in your life. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Professor Godbole, for enlightening us with your words. It has indeed been an honor for us to have had you as our guide. We now begin with the group presentations. Students have been divided into 12 groups, each group being led by a teacher from the Deens Academy. Each group will present their findings and research based on the theme of women and science.
Science is not a boys' game. It's not a girls' game. It's everyone's game. Good morning to one and all present here. My name is Anvesha, and today I'm going to talk about the social issues, policy guidelines, and the efforts made in India to make women in science interconnected. The team members of Group 1 are Arush, Kiyosha, Survi, Aditya Bakchi, Aditya Rao, Asad, Lasya, Riya, Tasmay, Sneha, and me. Let me start with the social issues. Some common social issues faced by women in science are: firstly, gender biasness and discrimination still exists. Secondly, it's hard for these women scientists to find a balance between family and work. They have been subjected to some problems in their career concerning the difficulty to balance family and work, especially that in their work as a scientific researcher, there's no difference between the schedules of men and women. They both work in the same manner and same schedules. Thirdly, the universities do not always support them. Women scientists believe that international organizations should give more research grants to women, giving them more access to funding. Women should be encouraged to apply and form groups with connections so that they can be heard and have themselves be recognized. It's important to stick up for yourself and be heard in order to create an international footprint and be recognized in STEM. And lastly, sometimes women scientists also face harassment and bullying. In daily work life, women encounter unprofessional behavior more often than men. Harassment remains a pervasive issue. In 2018, the National Academies of Science, Engineering and Medicine released a comprehensive report about harassment in STEM, which started about in 2018 and ended about in 2020. Many women turned down their career in science because of these social issues. Attracting and retaining women in sciences requires action on all fronts, stopping harassment, changing institutional cultures, and ensuring that women are included, recognized, and heard. To succeed in science, women must overcome subtle biases that favor men. These barriers need to be removed to succeed in the underrepresentation of women in science. In the United States, women receive 50% of geoscience PhDs but represent only 20% of geoscience faculty positions. The systemic underrepresentations of women in science fosters a culture of harassment, which in turn discourages women from careers in science and results in their underrepresentation. Although calls have been made for senior scientists to address harassment and break the cycle, a broader cultural shift is required to reach gender equity in science. Ultimately, the majority group must step up and share the burden of diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts if we are to succeed in making science diverse and equitable. Here are a few ways in which women could feel more included in science program. Firstly, stop harassing women. Most women in science experience sexual harassment at some point during their career. All forms of harassment have quantifiable negative consequences for victims. These consequences include eroding their sense of security in their workplace, slowing their productivity, and causing them to skip professional meetings where they do not feel safe. Men in the scientific community must make women feel more comfortable. Secondly, listen to women. Listening to all the scientific and personal experiences of women in science is a really good way to achieve gender diversity and equity in science. Effective listening requires paying attention to, understanding, not interrupting, believing, responding to, and remembering what is being said. The simple act of listening to a woman's science promotes her work while acknowledging the barriers she faces, validates their experiences, and improves the institutional climate. And lastly, be an active bystander. In addition to not harassing women, it's our responsibility to be active bystanders. When active bystanders suspect or witness potential or ongoing harassment, they step in to diffuse the situation and support the targeted party. Leaders of scientific institutions should require face-to-face active bystander training because online harassment trainings have been shown to backfire and may actually lead to increased workspace harassment. Men should participate in these active bystander training sessions when offered, such as the recent AGU fall meeting which was held in 2018. India as a country has also contributed in making women and science interconnected. The challenges faced by them are several, but most often the break in career arises out of motherhood and family responsibilities. To address such issues, the Department of Science and Technology of India launched the Women Scientists Scheme during 2002. This initiative primarily aimed at providing opportunities to women scientists and technologists between the age group of 27 to 57 years who had a break in their career but desired to return mainstream. Through this endeavor of the department, concentrated efforts have been made to give women a strong foothold in the scientific profession, helping them re-enter into the mainstream and provide a launchpad for further raids into the field of science and technology. Thank you.
Good morning to one and all. I am Shrey Gupta and today I cordially welcome you all to our National Science Day celebration at Deens Academy. Women have always been integral to science. They have made countless important contributions and have revolutionized the way we think of the world around us. Though it is still a sad reality that the contribution of very few women scientists is actually recognized. So, keeping this in mind, we have decided to base the theme of this year's National Science Day as Women in Science and have decided to recognize the contributions of women to the scientific field and at the same time encourage more women to go into science and contribute to our understanding of the world. This year, our Group 2, including Grade 8 and Grade 9 students, have worked tirelessly throughout the year to bring to you this presentation. We have chosen 3 women scientists and their contributions that revolutionized the world of science and gave a whole new perspective to the way we now understand the world. Our group includes Aishani Bose, Aparajita Joshi, Arani Jain, Atreya Madaka, Harshal Agarwal, Kanisha Jain, Kavya Jain, Kushagra Agarwal, and Shrey Gupta. We have worked under the expert guidance of Drishti ma'am and Ritu ma'am to prepare informative presentations on these 3 women scientists. These scientists are Anandibai Joshi, who advanced the world of universal healthcare by leaps and bounds as the first Indian female practitioner of Western medicine. Though she was suffering from tuberculosis, she worked hard and managed to get into a medical university in the USA and was also one of the first women to do so alongside Kalambini Ganguly. Caroline Herschel, who was a German astronomer who discovered numerous nebulae and comets, which helped to further our understanding of astronomy and was also the first professional female astronomer. Though she faced many hurdles as science was not to be seen as a profession for women in that era and was often under the shadow of her brother, William Herschel, who was a prodigious astronomer too. She made a name for herself in the field and started working independently. And last but definitely not the least, Katherine Johnson, who was a human computer who made critical calculations for many important NASA missions like the Apollo 11 mission, which was the first time humans went to the moon. Though she was African American, she strived for equal ranking among the prominent scientists in NASA at that time and to eliminate discrimination on the basis of gender or race. Without these women, the world would lack a lot of it that it has accomplished. If these great women were not there, India would not have progressed so fast in medical technology. We would have missed out on crucial early understanding of the universe, and men would not have gone to the moon without women. So, today we bring to you this informative and engaging presentation on the lives of these great women and their accomplishments in their respective fields. Through this presentation, you will get an in-depth view into the work of these women, their lives, and the walls of gender bias that they broke through. So, sit back and enjoy the life story of these great women who changed the face of the scientific community and paved the way for women to enter science.
This year's topic is Women in Science. Why? It is to appreciate the uncredited yet so important contributions that women over centuries have given to science. Today, I'll tell you a little bit about Nettie Maria Stevens, an American geneticist. Born on 7 July 1861 in Cavendish, Vermont, she was a bright child. She loved performing little experiments along with her teachers at school. Her father worked as a carpenter and earned just enough money to provide Nettie and her sister Emma a strong education through high school. Nettie was always at the top of her class. She and her sister were the 2 out of 3 women to graduate from the Westford Academy between 1872 and 1883. Stevens enrolled herself
at the Bryn Mawr College to pursue her career in science. She later received a PhD in cytology in 1903. Nettie Maria Stevens is known for her discovery of sex chromosomes and the determination of the X and Y chromosomes in the gender system. Before working on human cells, she worked on chromosomes in mealworms and different other marine species. It was not natural for a woman to pursue her careers, especially in science, but she did not listen to these requirements or customs. She loved science, so she went with it. However, her career ended too soon when she died in 1912. We will always remember her. Nettie Maria Stevens contributed more than many more scientists have done with much longer careers. Thank you.
Good morning, my dear friends in science and respected teachers. The scientist our group has chosen is an esteemed scientist, Dr. Jocelyn Bell Burnell, an astrophysicist from Ireland who discovered the first radio pulsars in 1967. A remarkable lady, she set a sterling example and was a great inspiration for young women scientists by breaking many a glass ceiling. She was also a great philanthropist who deeply cared for the poor and donated her entire prize money of $3 billion towards educating the poor. Her discovery was also recognized by the Nobel Prize of Physics, but was awarded to her male supervisor, Anthony Hewish. However, Bell Burnell made it crystal clear that she pursued science not for the awards or honors, but because she truly loved science and wanted to contribute in whatever way she could. She was the first woman to serve as the president of the Royal Astronomical Society and was also the president of the Institute of Physics. Today, we will be taking you through the fascinating journey of Mrs. Bell Burnell towards becoming a scientist. Thank you.
And today I will be talking about Lise Meitner. Lise Meitner was a contemporary in science by herself. She laid several groundbreaking works with Otto Hahn, but was never rewarded the Grand Prize or the Nobel Prize. She was rewarded many other prizes, but her co-collaborator Hahn had got the Nobel Prize. Without her contributions to Hahn's theories or her co-authoring, Hahn would have never been able to figure out the theories all by himself. Thus, I think that she should have been nominated for the Nobel Prize. She was an Austrian-Swedish physicist and had to leave Austria because of the Jewish Nuremberg laws that were placed. She was the first one to actually complete her doctoral in physics from the University of Vienna in 1905 and the second in the world. She was good in several things and especially excelled at science from her childhood. She is most popular for her discovery of protactinium-231 as a radioactive isotope in the year of 1917. She was also very popular among the women scientists and was also popular among all the eminent scientists such as Albert Einstein, who praised her by calling her the German Marie Curie. She was also known for the discovery of how the uranium nucleus splits into half during nuclear fission, which was a subpart of what she and Hahn had co-authored. She also gives us a lot of inspiration, and we can really take a leaf out of her book because she has actually done so many things to actually help us. For example, she has taught us that we should break all the barriers that come in our way and that we should always stay true and earnest, and if we want anything, then we should strive to get it. Thank you.
The question, what is matter, seems deceptively simple. After all, matter is all around us. But then, how did we come to discover what lies within? What were the scientific milestones that have led us to this knowledge of the building blocks of life itself? Where are we headed in the field of particle phenomena? May I invite Professor Rohini Godbole to shed light on this matter.
Hello, my friends. Let me give you my greetings on the occasion of National Science Day. And I thought I will try to tell you something that will interest you. It is to tell you the story of how humankind has found out through the ages what everything around us is made up of. And that I call, how do we know what lies within? So, this is the small story that I want to tell you in the next hour or so. Let's see how it goes. Okay. So, how will I go about it? I will first give you a small introduction as to what I mean by what am I going to try to cover it really. And then I will try to tell you how what we call elemental or fundamental, the whole point, the whole idea has really been changing from the time of Greeks or the Hindu sages who were talking about Panchamahabhutas till now. And then I will move over to a tale of molecules, atoms, and nuclei. I'm sure some of these words you have heard somewhere. There might be a few more words which you haven't heard, which I would try to introduce, and that will bring me to the story of the age of nucleons. And then I will talk about what is now the accepted description of the fundamental constituents of everything around us in the universe and the interactions among these fundamental constituents, which is called the standard model of particle physics. And then I will try to answer the question, where do we go next after these investigations and after these achievements of our humankind? So, this question, what makes the world go, what makes the world around us go? What is it made up of? This is kind of an age old question. And, even now, if we are discussing a contentious issue, or we are trying to understand some particular knotty problem, one would always say, let's understand what's the heart of the matter. So, heart of the matter is always very important. And the story of my discussion, the story is going to be about how we understand what lies at the heart of the matter. And in addition to just having this question, we always ask a second question. How do things around us work? So there are two important questions. One is, what are the things made up of? And the second question is, how do they work? Then a basic question which has been there literally from the ages is a question which says, is everything around us made up of some fundamental ultimate unit? And if so, what is that ultimate unit? But more important, equally important, I wouldn't say more important, equally important, how are these units put together? So here, what I have shown you on the left is a very famous statue by a very famous sculptor, French sculptor. His name was Rodin, and this is called Thinker. So what I want to actually tell you is that we scientists, or the humankind, why only scientists? The humankind, in fact, I would say, has been thinking about these questions, and this thinker statue somehow kind of displays that occupation of humankind from the early dawn of humankind. Okay, so let's see next. So what, as I was trying to tell you, the question as to what are the bricks and the mortars with which this whole edifice of life, of universe is made up of. This has been the question. And as I keep on saying, and I will tell you more carefully, the question has actually remained the same, but the answers have changed. And our perception of what the ultimate building blocks are has changed as our understanding up to how these blocks are put together has grown. And it won't be too wrong if I said that the efforts to answer this question has actually been responsible for development of science. So, if we went and thought ourselves to be a few hundred years BC, and then if we were to ask a very famous Greek, his name was Empedocles, if we had asked him, he would have said that everything around us is made up of earth, fire, wind, and water. Okay? And that's why in English, if you know since you know your English well, these are actually called elements. These are the elements of nature. So Empedocles, for example, thought that the entire everything in nature was made up of these four elements. The Indian sages, or they actually said, along with earth, fire, wind, and water, Akash, space, is also equally important. And these five elements actually make the whole. This is what you would have thought, or the question about what is everything made up of would have been answered by saying that everything around us is made up of these five elements. And as I said, these four are the elemental forces of nature, which reflects still the original idea that these were the elements. From this idea, few hundred years BC, from the times of the Greeks of elements, slowly evolved, and we are going to see some part of that journey, slowly evolved to come to chemical elements. Then we figured out that all the chemicals, elements combine, everything is made up of molecules. That is what we thought for a while. Then molecules, we realized, were made up of atoms. Then slowly we realized that atoms are actually made up of nuclei and electrons. But the nuclei themselves were also not fundamental, but they were made up of what are called quarks and leptons, which are right now for us just the names of the fundamental elementary particles. And today, in the 20th century, the accepted worldview, starting from the time of the Greeks, has been that everything around us, as I just now said, elements, molecules are, everything is made up of molecules. Molecules are made up of atoms. Atoms are made up of nuclei and electrons. Nuclei are made up of neutrons and protons. Neutrons and protons are made up of up and down type of quarks. So the entire world, finally, if I had to ask what are the more fundamental constituents of everything, those fundamental constituents are the up-down quarks, the electrons, as well as this is something new that happened in 20th century, where one realized, and I kept on telling you this, that it's not just enough to know what are the fundamental building blocks. We have to know how they are glued together. What is the mortar? And that mortar is the forces. And these forces, in the 20th century physics, we understood that there exists only four fundamental elementary forces. So there exist these fundamental quarks and electrons. There exist fundamental forces, and these fundamental forces are mediated or carried by objects whom we call bosons. So the worldview in the 20th century was that the world is made up of quarks, then electrons, as well as heavier version of the electrons. They are collectively called leptons. Then the force carriers, which are called the photon, which we know because we have heard about the photons all the time in our lives. And then some other bosons whose names you have not heard, but perhaps sometimes read in the newspapers. They are called the W and the Z boson. which carry the electromagnetic interactions, weak interactions, and strong interactions, the three fundamental interactions. And plus the final piece of the puzzle, the Higgs boson, which was found experimentally about 10 years back. So this is the world view today, beginning from this picture where we thought that these were the elements of nature. Now we have come to understand that the elements of nature are actually these objects. And what is even more important is that in principle, the laws of physics, which particle physicists have learned about by doing a lot of experiments, those laws which govern the behavior of these elementary particles, of these elemental blocks, actually allow us to predict behavior of all matter at all in all different conditions. And that's really heady. This really tells us that it's possible to understand things around us in terms of these basic fundamental building blocks and the forces which are also carried by the fundamental particles. So, the development in human scientific understanding has been revealing layers within layers within layers. I already said, we found molecules. Molecules were made up of atoms. Atoms were made up of electrons and nuclei. Nuclei were made up of neutrons and protons. Neutrons and protons were made up of quarks. So, it's natural to ask, is the story going to go on like this? I don't know how many of you ever spent time in your mother's kitchen, but for example, in old days when I grew up, there will be a container of oil, and on that oil there will be on that container of the oil there will be a picture. In that picture there will be a mother sitting down and using oil, and in her kitchen on the shelf will be another container of oil, which again will have a small picture on it, so on and so forth. So it will be like whether it is picture within picture within picture within picture. And is it going to go on like this? Are we going to keep on finding more and more pictures inside? Or is this what we have reached now, the innermost layer? Is this like a Russian doll where you take all the pieces out and what is left inside is just space? So is now the understanding that everything around us is made up of these objects and space? That is the question, and we believe that the answer is most likely this. We have indeed opened this Russian doll of particles completely. That's what we think. So this is the subject of particle physics. And as I keep on telling you, as I repeated a few times, but I want to repeat it so that it becomes clear, is that this subject of particle physics deals with three different issues. One is, what are the elementary building blocks? I already told you. Secondly, what holds them together? And then the third, which we will not discuss here at all, but which is extremely important, is how do you describe the whole thing mathematically? How do I understand mathematically that how these parts are put together? How do they interact with each other so that one can predict the behavior under many different conditions other than the conditions in which we see them on the earth, among us, so on and so forth. And this is really what the subject has been studying. And what we want to do really is follow the journey from the Greeks, times of the Greeks and the Panchamahabhutas, to come to today, how we have understood that these are the building blocks. So once again, now instead of names, I would put you here what I would call the periodic table of particle physics. And this has really arrived, and this happened in 4th July 2012. So these are the quarks. Up and down quarks are the ones. 2 up quarks and 1 down quark make a proton. 2 down quarks and 1 up quark make a neutron. Then these protons and neutrons would make nuclei. Nuclei with electrons would make atoms. Atoms with will make molecules. Molecules would make us finally. Okay. Whereas these other quarks and leptons that I have written here, which are heavier versions of the up and the down or the electron. They have different names, and they actually are created only in the early universe, in the Big Bang, or in high energy environment where people can do experiments. But we have been able to establish the existence of these fundamental particles. And then these are the force carriers. All this has been established experimentally in a series of experiments. Their masses are measured, their properties are measured, and we will not go into those properties. But this is the periodic table of particle physics before 4th July 2012, that is on the 3rd July 2012. This is what you would have said is the periodic table of particle physics. But on the 4th July 2012, this second table, the blue table, actually got one more entry in it, and that is the Higgs boson. And that is the particle that is sort of responsible to help us understand how all the massive particles in the universe have the mass consistent with certain very fundamental basic principles. Again, we need not go into that, but these are this is the periodic table. Okay. Now, question is, what are the sizes of these guys? I mean, some of you may know, may not know, but you will have seen a cell under a microscope. So you would have seen that the plant cells and what size are plant cells or cells of animals and so on and so forth, which we can see through a microscope. But what are these objects, fundamental objects that I'm talking about? The nucleus of a cell we can see using a microscope. How do we see that? How did people see the nucleus of an atom? So let me just try to give you an idea first of the distance scales that are involved. So this is the atom. And let me say that the atom is unit 1. We will look at these numbers on the right-hand side a little bit later. Now, a nucleus is about 10,000 times smaller than an atom. Okay. And this is experimentally shown. Whereas a proton or a neutron is about 10,000 times smaller than a nucleus, and therefore about 100,000 times smaller than an atom. And for quarks or electrons, we don't think they have any size. They are point-like, but experimentally, I can only put a limit. So they have been measured. The people have tried to measure their size. And what they know is that if at all they have a size, the size has to be smaller than 100,000 times smaller than an atom. And one atom in meters is 10 to the power of minus 10, which means that the quarks and the electrons are smaller than 10 to the minus 18 meters in size. So 1 angstrom, this is again, some of you in the 10th may have heard this word, that angstrom, and the size of an atom is an angstrom, where that is 10 to the about few angstroms. So 10 to the minus 10 meters, that's what this should have been here, not minus 8. This is 10 to the minus 8 centimeter, which is 10 to the minus 10 centimeters. And it ends with quarks and leptons, which are 100 million times smaller than an atom. And we actually believe that they are indivisible or point-like. And these sizes of different objects, which we thought were fundamental at different times, have actually been changing. And as I said, we have finally come to believe that these quarks and these electrons are not something that are going to be divisible further. And that is why we have made this periodic table of particle physics, which we see now. So just to give you an idea, what is meant by this 10 to the minus 8 meters? Let's try to get a sense of this, okay? So here what I show you is a patch 10 meters by 10 meters. And this is a patch of roses. And in fact, I have seen this patch of roses outside my window in the office at the laboratory CERN in Geneva, where there was this patch of roses, okay? And somebody there has taken these photographs, and therefore the story that I'm going to tell you is going to start from this patch of roses. So this is a square, And this square is 10 meter, represents a 10 meters by 10 meters area. These are the roses. Now you say that let me blow this up so that the same patch, same size, now represents a square of 1 meter by 1 meter. That means I just blow this, okay? I take a very small part, 1 meter by 1 meter, and that has been blown now to fill this size. So here you see that now you begin to see the flowers more clearly. Then you even see bees on the flowers. Okay. Now you go by another factor of 10. That means you go down by another factor of 10. You see there is a bee on this leaf. So this is a box. This box was 10 meters by 10 meters. Here the same size box was 1 meter by 1 meter. Now the same size of a box here is 0.1 meter by 0.1 meter, which means that here I had from here to here I went by a factor 10 down. Now here to here I zoomed by a factor 100. Now I start seeing the bee. Now if I go by another factor 10 down below, then now what this size, each side is only 0.01 meter by 0.01 meter. And here you see the bee in more detail. You start seeing the compound eye of the beetle. Now you go and do another factor 10 zooming on each side. When you do that, now you start seeing the compound eye in detail, and you even begin to see the root of a filament, which helps the bee see things. Then you go down by another factor of 10, 001 to 0001, and then you start seeing this compound eye and this filament much better. And now you go down by another factor of 10. I hope you realize how many factors of 10 we have gone. From 10 by 10 we have come down to 10 to the minus 5. That means we have gone down 6 orders of magnitude. And now you see here that was 10 meters initially, and this is now 10 to the minus 5 meters. So we have gone down, 7 orders of magnitude. And here you start seeing the filament. Now if you blow up by another factor 10, then you start seeing the base of the filament. And if you, now of course, this blowing up is being done by instruments which are completely beyond what you and me can see. And here, this is now the same square now represents 10 to the minus 7 meter to 10 to the minus 7 meter, which means about 8 orders of magnitude below. And then another order of magnitude, another factor of 10 below. And then you see that this filament actually that is made up of DNAs, and some of you would have heard the word of DNA, at least in the popular literature. And this DNA is actually made up of carbon molecules or carbon atoms. And that carbon atom is made up. So now from every time I'm going down by 1 or 2 orders, here I've gone down by 2 orders of magnitude. This is now 10 to the minus 10 meters. And there you see, as I told you, an atom is size 1 angstrom. So this is the carbon atom. This is the carbon nucleus. Now I go down by another 10,000 times smaller. And then I begin to see that the nucleus, which is made up of this nucleus, which is made up of neutrons and protons. So this is one of these, is this guy. And now this proton or neutron, when I go down, I begin to see that they're made up of quarks. And after this, we really don't know. Okay. So this is really the, from 10 meters by 10 meters square, which had the rose patch. Now I have 10 to the 16 times. That means every time I have gone down by a factor of 10, and I have done it 16 times. And that would represent then the region where the quarks are confined inside a proton. So this is the image, and this is what is meant by saying that the size of a proton is 100 million times smaller than the size of an atom, and the size of an atom is again 10 orders of magnitude below the sizes of human beings, like who are roughly, if you're me, then you are only 4.5 meters high. But if you are normal people, it's about 4 feet high, rather only 1 meter high, and you people might be 100 anywhere between 1 and 2 meters. So this is what has happened. Now, when did this journey begin? This journey began really in earnest in second half of 19th century. And this is when Faraday actually understood that electricity comes in multiples of some basic unit. And this was simply done by ionization experiments. And then Thomson, J.J. Thomson, actually did experiments with cathode rays, and he was able to find a particle which had a E by M charge to mass ratio, which was different than the hydrogen ion. And that too, one can say, was the first elementary particle. So 1897, which is now a fair amount of number of years away, this was the discovery of the electron by J.J. Thomson, and the world of elementary particles was born. How did he do it? He did it with a simple apparatus called a cathode ray tube. What happens in the cathode ray tube? The electrons are accelerated, they're emitted by a hot filament using simply the potential difference between the plus positive and the negative nodes, and the electron gets accelerated and moves and deposits itself on the screen and of the cathode ray tube, and you apply either electric or magnetic fields and check how the electron travels. So this was the classic accelerator which was used for the discovery of the first fundamental particle, which we call the electron. And this love affair between the accelerators and the fundamental particles has really never stopped. So this is a slightly more technical view. This is the cathode, this is the anode. There is a potential difference that has been applied by a high voltage generator. Then this has to have perfect vacuum, or as good a vacuum as is possible. So that is this vacuum pump. And again, you can see the role of technology. At that time, creating high vacuum was itself a very advanced technology. And because J.J. Thomson's group had that high technology, he was able to measure these, locate these, note the fact that these particles which are traveling, rays first he had called them, which travel from the cathode to anode, are indeed actually made up of fundamental particles which have a different charge to mass ratio than the only other guy for whom this was known, namely the hydrogen ion. So I have not told you up to 1897 how we arrived at the idea that everything is made up of atoms, and that is takes me a little bit away, but therefore I'm going to not discuss it. But if you want, we can discuss it later in questions. So the next major step came in the so-called Rutherford scattering experiment. This happened in 1911, and this really shaped the physics of the century. What experiment did he do? Some of your students who are studying in the 10th would have studied these experiments, would have heard about it, but for some of you, you would not know. So let me describe this experiment to you. The experiment is rather simple. You take a radioactive source. This radioactive source, particularly you take alpha particle source. These alpha particles are emitted from the source, and they are going in all possible directions. You keep a thin gold foil in the path of those alpha rays. And then what you do, alpha particles, and then what you do is you try to see how many of them, if any, hit this zinc sulfide screen, and you change the place where the zinc sulfide screen has been put. So this is your detector, because what you're doing is that you're using a small microscope and you are looking at scintillations that the alpha particles will cause when they hit the zinc sulfide screen. And what he really found is that most of the alpha particles actually went quite undeflected and reached the zinc sulfide screen, went in the straight line, there was no problem. But some of them rebounded, and some of them, I mean, they moved the microscope all around, and sometimes they found alpha particles coming backwards. And that was something that Rutherford found initially very hard to understand. And in the model of an atom that Thomson had put forward, this would have never happened. And it is from this that Rutherford concluded that atom actually consists of a lot of free space where nothing exists, as a result of which most of the alpha particles go through that space. But once in a while, it finds a charge concentrated in a very small area, and that's almost a point, and that's what you call, it's like a nucleus, in analogy with the nucleus of a cell, in fact. And it's like, you think of an simple scenario. Supposing you are trying to cross a road, okay, and in the middle of the road there is an accident. So as a result of which there is a lot of people around it, people are all trying to look what has happened, what is the accident. Now, if you, while trying to cross the road, try to go through the knot of people, you will be pushed back. But if you go around this knot of people, you will just go and cross the road without any trouble. So the alpha particles which went around the knot crossed without any deflection. Most of the alpha particles went deflected, but the alpha particles which hit this knot at the center actually got pushed back, and that's how they rebounded. So to understand this, a knowledge of classical mechanics and electromagnetism was quite necessary to see what was to be expected for a given distribution of space inside the atom. So this is how you see high energy particles to see things. Now, higher the energy, the wavelength is shorter. And this has to do with, I will go later on have a point about it. So right now, please bear with me. Rutherford was using alpha particles to look inside the atom. And these alpha particles had energy of million electron volts. Now, what is 1 electron volt? 1 electron volt is the energy that an electron gains when it falls through a potential difference of 1 volt. Million electron volts means that it falls through a potential difference of 1 million volts. That energy will be called 1 million electron volts. But these are alpha particles which are just coming from the nucleus, and the nucleus has given them that energy. The nuclear reactions have produced them. And these MEV energy the alpha particles actually can be used to measure distances which are bigger than 1/100th of an angstrom. I will show you a formula a little later. Right now, you take my word for it. So therefore, these alpha particles could be used to resolve atoms into nucleus and electrons. And the nuclear size, the size of the nucleus, therefore, must be smaller than 1/100th of an angstrom. This is what Rutherford's experiment told us. Now, since I said to you this, that higher and higher energy means shorter and shorter wavelengths. So therefore, higher the energy, shorter the wavelength, and better is the resolution of our microscope. So, high energy particle beams are actually a meter stick measure, and they kind of, they can measure the size by scattering the beam of the object. And as I said, the resolving power is smaller if the energy is higher. So higher and higher energies can probe smaller and smaller distances, and therefore the elementary particle physics is equivalent to be called high energy physics. But what I want to show you on this meter stick is that to see sizes of different objects, different size objects, we need different tools. To see galaxies, for example, what do we use? I hope some of you know it. We can use, for example, telescopes. We can use radio telescopes. There is a giant radio wave telescope in near Pune, which India has built, and where rest of the world comes sometimes to see these objects. Then from ordinary telescope, you can see one can buy a small telescope with which one can see planets, one can see the rings that are around Saturn. This is what, for example, Galileo did. Then the human eye is enough to see objects of the size of a dog, for example, 1 meter, 2 meter, 10 meters. We can easily see them with our eye. If I want to see a cell in a plant, now I need to have a microscope. But if I want to see a DNA, which I showed you was many, many, many times smaller than the cell in a plant, then you need actually electron microscopes. And if you want to see the nucleus, which is what we are going to do next, you need particle accelerators. So the relationship between our increasing knowledge of how constituents are put together at a given level and finding structures at yet another shorter distance scale has been extremely fascinating. And most of the time, the new constituents, new structures have been found when we were trying to verify our theories, which were describing how constituents are put together at a particular level of elementarity. And some of the constituents actually came quite unannounced to the party. And very often the experimental research then propelled developments of new theoretical ideas. These new theoretical ideas then propelled further ideas about more constituents, or whether this is the total number of constituents. So there has been this interplay between theory and experiments. We theorists have been able to predict new particles, sometimes including their masses as well as their new interactions, based on the knowledge that was available on the interactions which hold the constituents together, and experiments have confirmed or disproved this. This is how this whole journey has proceeded. So, for example, the nucleon structure of a nucleus was actually arrived at by observing patterns of properties of nuclei. You know, that one found that the masses of all the different nuclei were almost integral multiples of each other. So one said, yes, okay, so there must be one basic nucleus, and that basic element of the nucleus was actually the hydrogen ion that we talked about already, that we know. Then realizing that therefore hydrogen ion, which appears at the center of the proton, center of a hydrogen atom, is actually the proton. But then nuclei contain more than the protons. They also contain a particle which is almost like the proton, but which doesn't have a charge, and that's called a neutron. So the nuclei have actually protons and neutrons. So if you were living around 1900 and I don't know, 20s, okay, and if you had asked what are the fundamental particles, people would have said electron, photon, neutron, and proton. And then maybe, you know, by this time, 1930, I will come to that in a minute, people started realizing that from the beta decays, they postulated yet another new particle called a neutrino. So it would have been actually the total list of fundamental particles around that time. But because the protons and neutrons were observed outside the nucleus also, people knew that a nucleus is made up of neutrons and protons, but it was still not clear whether neutrons and protons are fundamental themselves or they are made up of something more. And one felt that one needed more energetic particles to unravel the secrets of the nucleus, and then further unravel the secrets of the neutron and the proton. And one can state Rutherford, who said that it has long been my ambition to have available a copious supply of atoms and electrons which have energies transcending those of the alpha and the beta particles from the radioactive bodies. And at that time, what were the availabilities for accelerators to accelerate particles? One was, of course, the natural accelerator, cosmic ray, and the other was man-made accelerators. So these were the cosmic rays, and these actually in India, we had a lot of groups studying the cosmic ray physics early on, and one of the very famous Indian particle physicists called M.G.K. Menon actually had worked with a Nobel Prize winner, Powell, to study one of the first early considered elementary particle found in the cosmic rays. So these were the cosmic rays, which are very, very high energy, and even today they hold a lot of surprises and become a very important tool. But on the other hand, these are uncontrolled experiments. We don't know what is the energy. We do not have any control over what is the energy of the original cosmic ray. So one wanted to make man-made accelerators, and people started making these accelerators, as I said, from the cathode ray tube, which had few electron volts as the total energy. And as the years have gone by, actually particle physicists or accelerator physicists have been able to accelerate particles to higher and higher energies, and higher energies means shorter and shorter distance scales. So these accelerators have actually helped us in probing the heart of the matter. And what is an accelerator? Now this you can see clearly, that if you take an electron and then it passes through potential differences, then it is going to gain energy from the electric field, and therefore the force on the electron is q times the charge of the electron times the electric field. This is basically Maxwell's equation, and that is how the electron will get accelerated as it travels from one node to another. And here, for example, is an example of an accelerating cavity where you can accelerate about 5 million millivolt per million volts, 5 million volts per meter. You can also accelerate the guys using magnetic field, and here the electron is moving in a magnetic field, and when it moves through the magnetic field, it gets energies and starts becoming, and every time it travels, it gets a kick, and as a result of which increased energy, it starts traveling with higher and higher velocity. So that's another way of accelerating the objects. Here I have shown you the example of the first accelerator that was built in 1931 by Cockcroft and Walton. And this is just an electron or any ion traveling between huge potential differences. And this was actually very dangerous because large potential differences, as you can imagine, would start sparking. So one has to be very, very careful and have large insulation. But then one realized in a few years that it is not necessary to make these huge potential difference accelerators having this huge potential difference. You can actually use the magnetic fields and the electric fields in conjunction and make very small accelerators. And this is what is called a cyclotron. And this little cyclotron, which was about 4.5 inches high, and this is a real room. So you can see that this is a few meters. And this acceleration of an electron or a charge by these Cockcroft-Walton accelerator is about the same level of acceleration can be brought about by to 1 million electron volts by this little object. And what I'm showing you here is a quarter next to it. So you just see that this was a big decrease in size that is required for a given energy. And this made big progress in the acceleration energies that we could reach. And this is what happened 1933. This is where the big step came from here to here. And then continuously using these techniques, people built bigger and bigger accelerators. And this is, for example, I'm showing you first stage of an accelerator is still today these generators like this, and some version of Cockcroft-Walton accelerator, and that is this Van de Graaff generator in USA in Fermi National Accelerator Laboratory near Chicago. And this is you can see the huge shielding as well as the insulation, etc. And this is where the Van de Graaff generator accelerates the particles. At the end of it, they get accelerated using this techniques of circular acceleration. And here we see the Large Hadron Collider tunnel where these particles get accelerated, and they get steered by magnetic fields, and this is sitting on magnets which are creating these magnetic fields. So this is how these big accelerators were made. So from 1947 onwards, first in 1933 we made these accelerators, but really the progress came in 1947 when experiments with these cosmic rays were available in the beginning. And these experiments actually showed existence of new kinds of particles. They were like protons, like neutrons, And then one started calling them strange because they were produced at the same rates like protons and neutrons in the cosmic rays, but they lived out much, much longer. And the determination of their masses, lifetimes, interaction, everything was done. But at this point, people realized that all of them cannot be fundamental. So this is the reason, first time people felt that protons and neutrons cannot be fundamental, because there are many other particles like it, and they have different masses. And how can we say that only protons and neutrons make the whole world? So actually, Gell-Mann and Zweig actually use theoretical considerations, and this is where the idea about theory, the interplay between theory and experiments is going to come into play. Because in around 1960, what people had done is that they had measured the masses, the lifetimes, the interactions of these particles. So he observed the patterns, certain symmetries in those patterns, and then he said that all that can be understood and explained if we assume that all of them, not just the proton and the neutron, but the extra new particles that have been found, that they are made of even more fundamental objects called quarks. And this was the quark model. At this point, they needed only 3 types of quarks, up, down, and strange. And this is how they thought that all the new particles that were being seen in cosmic rays could be understood as being made up of various types of quarks. And this time it was the pattern and the regularity that was exhibited by the properties of the members of the particle zoo that was used by Gell-Mann and Zweig to reduce the number of fundamental constituents, quark. But the point was nobody had been able to break up a proton and neutron into quarks. So therefore, a lot of people actually believed that these quarks are not quite real entities. They are just an artifact of mathematics. How do we know they really exist? And worse still, they were not just that they did not come out when we broke the proton or a neutron by hitting it with a large amount of energy, because by now people were able to do experiments with higher and higher energies with, as I showed you in this plot, here energies were increasing, and this is where a lot of energy was given to the protons and the neutrons, and they didn't break. So now the question was, what is happening? If the protons and neutrons, what I mean by this, that for example, when you heat a thin foil, okay, electrons are emitted. These are called, thermoelectrons. That means that the electrons existed inside the metal. When you heated them, they got enough energy, so they jumped out. Like the water, you boil it, and when it gets enough energy because of the steam, some of the drops of water will actually come out and jump out of the pot. Similarly, one had thought that when one energized the protons, sometimes the constituents from inside will come out, but nobody was coming out. So therefore, people were not ready to believe that these quarks were really real. But then came a very wonderful experiment, and this experiment was done in the US in Stanford Linear Accelerator. So this was now an accelerator which was much longer than this little tiny accelerator that I showed you. And this accelerator accelerated electron beams from 1 MeV to now two orders of magnitude higher, something like 600 MeV. Remember what I told you? If I increase the energy by 2 orders of magnitude, I can look at distances which are 2 orders of magnitude smaller because my resolving power increases. So there is this accelerator which produced a beam of electrons which was incident on a neutron or a proton, and then all you did was you looked at the scattered electron. I hope some of you see the similarity between this and Rutherford's experiment. Rutherford had alpha particles. He was hitting them on a thin gold foil, and he was looking at the alpha particles which came out either behind the screen or behind the gold foil or on the other side of the gold foil. Now here, this was very similar. This was the beam, this was the target, and this was the detector. Let me show you what the beam and the detector was, except that Rutherford's experiment, the entire experiment stayed inside a room. Here, this is the accelerator, and this is the lab somewhere where the electrons were accelerated. and then they kept on accelerating through this 1 mile long chain where the electron kept on going through more and more potential difference and gained a lot of energy. So now this is different than erecting the huge towers to creating potential difference. Here the potential difference is created and in this pipe, and at the other end of this pipe is this detector. And this detector, just see how big it is. This is a person, to show you in its sort of perspective. And this detector could actually be moved only through very few angles, unlike the Geiger counter which Rutherford had, which could be moved all around the room behind the beam also. That couldn't be done in this case. But anyway, this was the experiment. And with this experiment, people actually found results which were extremely similar to what was found by Rutherford. They started looking at the electron which was being scattered from the nucleus, and then they suddenly realized that the and then you expected, depending on if the nucleus was not made up of neutrons and protons, or if the proton was not made up of something more, you expected the electrons to come out at a certain angle, and you could compute the number of electrons that come out at that angle. And what you found, that the number of electrons that were coming out and that you were measuring at a given angle was not following the calculations which you did by assuming that the proton had no further structure, proton had no further size. And in fact, by making these measurements, by measuring this distribution of the angle of the number of electrons arriving at certain angles, remember, in Rutherford scattering, what Rutherford told us was that because some electrons came in the backward direction, that is at theta equal to 180 degrees, at large angles, which was against the prediction of the angular distribution if the matter in the atom was all smoothly distributed. Precisely that way, the angle, the number of electrons that got scattered at different angles did not match with the prediction that assumed that all the proton charge was actually concentrated at one point. In fact, people found that the proton had a finite size. Not just that, so this is what they did. They counted the number of electrons scattered at a particular angle theta and compared it with the expectation if the nucleus was a point or if the proton was a point. And in all these experiments, they found out that the nucleus had a size, the proton had a size, and one could measure that size of the proton or the nucleus by looking at how much this angular distribution differed from what was expected by assuming it to be a point. So this is what really happened, and this is how one understood that the nucleus is made up of neutrons and protons in a direct way. There are other ways in terms of, like I already told you, that the properties of nuclei, the masses, the spins, understanding those properties, one also had figured out that perhaps nuclei can be understood in terms of if they are made up of neutrons and protons. In nuclear reactions, neutrons and protons actually came out of the nucleus, so we also understood that that was a correct model description. But now here we went further, and the experiment said that not just that the nuclei are made up of neutrons and protons, but the protons themselves are made up of something else, and that something else is quarks. So in fact, people made more measurements, and then they found that the properties of these so-called quarks that they could measure actually matched exactly with the properties that Gell-Mann had proposed. So therefore, what Gell-Mann and Zweig had proposed from entirely theoretical arguments indeed turned out to be the truth, matched with what was being measured in these experiments. So therefore, we understood that matter is made up of fundamental constituents like quarks, and by doing experiments, by looking inside the inside matter deeper and deeper with using higher and higher energy. But we kept on doing experiments, and now we have done experiments with this Large Hadron Collider, whose picture I showed you here, okay? And even doing all these experiments so far, we haven't found any evidence which tells us that the quarks and the electrons have any size, that means that all such measurements that we have made of angular distributions have matched with what we can calculate and predict, assuming that these are point-like objects. And then you would just say that perhaps because you don't have high enough energy, tomorrow if you have even higher energy, you might find that the electrons and nuclei, electrons and quarks are also made up of something more. But actually that is where the development of the theory that has come, the mathematical structure that has come into place, actually plays a very important role. And it is because of that that the theorists are able to say that we do not expect a substructure for the electrons and the quarks, and therefore somehow the story of what are the fundamental building blocks has come to rest in this idea of quarks and leptons and the gauge bosons, of course. And higher and higher energies actually have helped us find newer and heavier particles and newer interactions which were predicted by our theories. And these newer machines were actually constructed based on the predictions of the theory, and the theories were based on the results of the earlier machines. So this is how the story has gone on. How have we known what energies we should accelerate to find these new particles? There, the science and technology actually has come together in joining hands and telling us how to go on. For example, in the Rutherford's case, the energy that was required was decided by Gamau's theory of alpha decay, which predicted the height of the Coulomb barrier. And many, many decades later, it is the model of three Nobel laureates called Sheldon Glashow, Abdus Salam, who was a Indian Pakistani physicist of Indian origin after undivided India, and Steven Weinberg. And these three had actually set the bar for high energy physics machine by telling them what would be the energy required to produce the top quark, the W, the Z, and the Higgs boson. And hand in hand, the theory and experiments were able to make progress. And this is how the Large Hadron Collider was built. It squeezes energy into space about a million times smaller than a mosquito, and temperatures which are billion times higher than that at sun. So that is the kind of technology that is required to produce the energy density and temperatures so that we can recreate the conditions in the early Big Bang, because as I told you, some of the quarks which do not exist in ordinary matters or leptons will be produced only in these particle accelerators. So now do we say, is the story over? Actually not. The adventure of fundamental physics still goes on. And why is that? That is very easy to understand. The basic laws of physics, as I already mentioned, can explain the behavior of matter of all shapes and sizes under all conditions in principle. So, the laws of elementary particles governing the behavior of objects at the heart of the nuclei of atoms have actually something to say for cosmic observations. In practice, we can kind of understand what happened in the early universe. How did the first elements form? Of course, you need astrophysics. Of course, you need electromagnetism, but you need the laws of particle physics that we have studied under this in this very high energy conditions. And therefore, to understand what happens at cosmic distances, which are millions of parsec, and one parsec is about 200 times the Earth's sun distance, what happens in a nucleus, which is 1/10 of a billion centimeter, I already showed you, and an electron whose size, if at all it has a size, is billionth of a meter strip. In spite of all of this, what happens and what laws of physics work at this distance scale are necessary for us to explain what happens at these large distance scales. So it explains to us why our universe contains more matter than antimatter. It also helps us to understand another question, why the most of the matter in the universe doesn't seem to shine. That's called dark matter in the universe. And also perhaps one day it will explain to us why our universe is continuously accelerating. So the physics at the heart of the matter actually does play a role in our trying to understand physics at the cosmic distance scale. Now, this parsecs and even bigger distance scales and time scales again might throw us off. So let me try to show you a very short film for 5 minutes to show you what happens if we go on now. Instead of zooming in, now we zoom out. So I'm going to stop sharing this particular slide. I'm going to stop it, and then I'm going to show you a film in half a second. So let me see if I can, here it is. So let me show you this film. I have to share this screen. 1 second. Share screen. Yeah. So this is my screen, and let's just look at this film for about 5 minutes. 1 second. My machine is telling me that you are not seeing this. So let me try to see if I can bring it to front again. 1 moment. If it doesn't work, I will show it to you later when I finish my talk. Okay. All right. So we will go back to the video in a few minutes. How big is big? We will see that in a minute. But now what happens is that possibilities exist that the particle theories can explain us or give answers to these cosmological questions, and the high precision cosmological measurements can actually constrain particle theories, and therefore there are really exciting times ahead in the world of particle physics. In fact, one can look at the world of the universe through many different probes. One can look at it through optical, and one can look at it, that is the Hanley telescope, for example, in India, the radio telescopes, which are GMRT and square kilometer array, then the gravitational telescopes, which is the laser interferometry gravitational observatory, neutrinos, which are we are doing experiments in different big labs, but the most important one for us is the Indian Neutrino Observatory, and the colliders, such as the Large Hadron Collider. I want to just show you for fun that this is one picture of the sun through photon that is really taken through telescopes, and this is another picture that is taken through neutrinos, and you see the two pictures actually match quite well. So this multiwavelength astronomy is really what's going to happen. We have actually a first principle understanding of many chemical, physical and biological phenomena in terms of currently accepted fundamental constituents of matter. This is really very pleasing. And however, where we understand a lot about chemistry, we still don't quite understand the chemistry of life, and the basic chemical properties of cellular material are a big issue of discussion, but still we are improving in our understanding. But for example, how did the complexity of life still arise? We don't understand that. And why are the chemical properties of life on Earth are what they are? That's a mystery. How was matter created? How was life created? Why does the universe contain only matter? Why the L amino acids are more common in biological system? We can go on. So the mysteries of nature are still there. And particles, the theories of particles have a role to play. And hopefully some of you guys and gals will have answers to this question. And the science discoveries that are made in these various mega projects and the technological developments that happen during that execution will actually show us the way. So I hope you have enjoyed this story, and I would try to see if I can show my video once again. If that doesn't work out, we will stop this talk here. Thank you very much.
The picnic near the lakeside in Chicago is the start of a lazy afternoon, early 1 October. We begin with a scene 1 meter wide, which we view from just 1 meter away. Now, every 10 seconds, we will look from 10 times farther away, and our field of view will be 10 times wider. This square is 10 meters wide, and in 10 seconds the next square will be 10 times as wide. Our picture will center on the picnickers even after they've been lost to sight. 100 meters wide, the distance a man can run in 10 seconds. Cars crowd the highway, powerboats lie at their docks. This square is a kilometer wide, 1,000 meters, the distance a racing car can travel in 10 seconds. We see the great city on the lake shore. 10 to the 4th meters, 10 kilometers, the distance a supersonic airplane can travel in 10 seconds. We see first around the Lake Michigan, then the whole Great Lake. 10 to the 5th meters, the distance an orbiting satellite covers in 10 seconds. Long parades of clouds, the day's weather in the Middle West. 10 to the 6th, a 1 with 6 zeros, 1,000,000 meters. Soon the Earth will show as a solid sphere. We are able to see the whole Earth now, just over a minute away from the journey. The Earth diminishes into the distance, but those background stars are so much farther away, they do not yet appear to move. A line extends at the true speed of light. In 1 second, it half crosses the tilted orbit of the Moon. Now we mark a small part of the path in which the Earth moves about the Sun. Now the orbital paths of the neighboring planets, Venus and Mars, then Mercury. Entering our field of view is the glowing center of our solar system, the Sun, followed by the massive outer planets swinging wide in their big orbits. That odd orbit belongs to Pluto. A fringe of 1,000,000 comets, too faint to see, completes the solar system. 10 to the 14th. As the solar system shrinks to one bright point in the distance, our Sun is plainly now only one among the stars. Looking back from here, we note 4 southern constellations, still much as they appear from the far side of the Earth. This square is 10 to the 16th meters, 1 light year not yet out to the next star. Our last 10-second step took us 10 light years further. The next will be 100. Our perspective changes so much with each step now that even the background stars will appear to converge. At last we pass the bright star Arcturus and some stars in the Dipper. Normal but quite unfamiliar stars and clouds of gas surround us as we traverse the Milky Way galaxy. Giant steps carry us into the outskirts of the galaxy, and as we pull away, we begin to see the great flat spirals facing us. The time and path we chose to leave Chicago has brought us out of the galaxy along a course nearly perpendicular to its disk. The 2 little galaxies satellites of our own are the clouds of Magellan, 10 to the 22nd power, 1,000,000 light years. Groups of galaxies bring a new level of structure into the scene. Glowing points are no longer single stars, but whole galaxies of stars seen as one. We pass the big Virgo cluster of galaxies among many others, 100 million light years out. As we approach the limit of our vision, we pause to start back home. This lonely scene, the galaxies like dust, is what most of space looks like. This emptiness is normal. The richness of our own neighborhood is the exception. The trip back to the picnic on the lakefront will be a sped-up version, reducing the distance to the Earth's surface by 1 power of 10 every 2 seconds. Every 2 seconds we will appear to cover 90% of the remaining distance back to the Earth. Notice the alternation between great activity and relative inactivity, a rhythm that will continue all the way into our next goal, a proton in the nucleus of the carbon atom beneath the skin of the hand of the sleeping man at the picnic. 10 to the 9th meters, 10 to the 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. We are back at the starting point. We slow up at 1 meter, 10 to the 0 power. Now we reduce the distance to our final destination by 90% every 10 seconds, each step much smaller than the one before. At 10 to the minus 2, 1/100th of a meter, 1 centimeter, we approach the surface of the hand. In a few seconds, we will be entering the skin, crossing layer after layer from the outermost dead cells into a tiny blood vessel within. Skin layers vanish in turn, an outer layer of cells, felty collagen, a capillary containing red blood cells and the lymphocyte. We enter the white cell. Among its vital organelles, the porous wall of the cell nucleus appears. The nucleus within holds the heredity of the man in the coiled coils of DNA. As we close in, we come to the double helix itself, a molecule like a long twisted ladder whose rungs of paired bases spell out twice in an alphabet of 4 letters the words of the powerful genetic message. At the atomic scale, the interplay of the inner motion becomes more visible. We focus on one commonplace group of 3 hydrogen atoms bonded by electrical forces to a carbon atom. 4 electrons make up the outer shell of the carbon itself. They appear in quantum motion as a swarm of shimmering points. At 10 to the minus 10 meters, 1 angstrom, we find ourselves right among those outer electrons. Now we come upon the 2 inner electrons held in a tighter swarm. As we draw toward the atom's attracting center, we enter upon a vast inner space. At last, the carbon nucleus, so massive and so small. This carbon nucleus is made up of 6 protons and 6 neutrons. We are in a domain of universal modules. There are protons and neutrons in every nucleus, electrons in every atom, atoms bonded into every molecule out to the farthest galaxy. As a single proton fills our scene, we reach the edge of present understanding. Are these some quarks in intense interaction? Or what will we find one day at the next level? Our journey has taken us through 40 powers of 10. If now the field is 1 unit, then when we saw many clusters of galaxies together, it was 10 to the 40th, or a 1 with 40 zeros.
Thank you, Professor Godbole. That was very informative. We now continue with the group presentations.
Hello, I am Tanya Behrani. Today our group is talking about 3 different scientists. Francis Arnold by Mruja, Abhinav and Manya, Jennifer Doudna by Soham, Tanya and Roshita, and Patricia Erabat by Shrihari, Akshit and Elena. First, Francis Arnold. She pioneered the use of direct evolution to design new enzymes for which she received a Nobel Prize. It can be used to design proteins for a wide variety of applications. For example, she used direct evolution to design enzymes which can be used to produce renewable fuels and pharmaceutical compounds with less harm to the environment. The uses of this include more environmentally friendly manufacturing of chemical substances such as pharmaceuticals and the production of renewable fuels. Enzymes created with this technique have replaced toxic chemicals in many industrial processes. Then we have Jennifer Doudna. She is an American biochemist known for her pioneering work in CRISPR gene editing, for which she received the award of Nobel Prize in Chemistry. She was the first to propose that CRISPR-Cas9 could be used for programmable gene editing of genomes. Scientists call it genetic scissors, a tool that snips DNA with great precision. It is faster, cheaper, and more accurate than the previous techniques of editing DNA and has a wide range of potential applications. And it is currently the simplest and most versatile method of genetic manipulation. It has restored the sight to many individuals who were blind before this invention.
This device has also become normalized universal solution to cataracts, making the cause of blindness no more. Thank you.
Good morning to one and all present here. My name is Arunima Singh and I welcome you to the National Science Day Ceremony 2021. This year our team, Scientist Synergy, has been assigned 3 incredible women scientists who made a difference in the world. They were Sylvia Earle, Grace Hopper and Darshan Ranganathan. Our team consisted of Anish, Ananya, Arunima, Ivanti, Freya, Ishanya, Jeevita, Mehak and Yogesh. We were led by Sunita ma'am, who helped us whenever we were in doubt. We had an amazing experience throughout the entire session and got to know each other better. We were split up to research about Sylvia Earle, Grace Hopper and Darshan Ranganathan. Sylvia Earle. Sylvia Earle is an American marine biologist, explorer, author and lecturer. She was the first ever female chief scientist of the US National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration and was named by Time magazine as its first hero for the planet in 1998. Earle was the curator of psychology at the California Academy of Sciences and a research associate at the University of California, Berkeley, Radcliffe Institute scholar and research fellow at Harvard University. In 1982, she and her later husband, Graham Hawkes, founded Deep Ocean Engineering to design, operate, support, and consult on piloted and robotic subsea systems. In 1985, the Deep Ocean Engineering team designed and built the Deep Rover Research Submarine, which operates down to 1,000 meters or 3,300 feet. She has also been awarded many honors such as the Noggy Award, Explorers Club Lowell Thomas Award, Society of Women Geographers Gold Medal, and many more. She is an inspiration to many and will continue to be one. Grace Hopper. Grace Hopper was born on December 9th in the year 1906 and is an American computer scientist and United States Navy Rear Admiral. She was one of the pioneers of computer programming who invented one of the first linkers. She tried to enlist in the Navy during World War II but was rejected since she was 34 years old. She then joined Eckert-Mauchly Computer Corporation in 1949 and was also part of the UNIVAC 1 team. She pioneered the idea of automatic programming languages and developed the first compiler called A0 in 1952. She then proposed the idea of writing programs in words rather than symbols. Her efforts culminated in the development of COBOL, which is still extensively used today. Grace Hopper received the National Medal of Technology in 1991. She was posthumously awarded the Presidential Medal of Freedom by President Obama. The Grace Hopper Conference is currently the biggest platform for women in science. Darshan Ranganathan. Darshan Ranganathan was an organic chemist from India who was known for her work in bioorganic chemistry, including pioneering work in protein folding. She was also recognized for her work in supramolecular assemblies, molecular design, chemical simulation of key biological processes, synthesis of functional hybrid peptides, and synthesis of nanotubes. In 1970, she began research at the Indian Institute of Technology Kanpur, or IIT Kanpur, and went on to author challenging problems in organic reaction mechanisms, art in biosynthesis, the synthetic chemist challenge. She is said to be India's most prolific organic chemist and was a fellow of the National Academy of Sciences. She also won the A.V. Rama Rao Foundation Award and many others. Darshan Ranganathan was diagnosed with breast cancer in 1997 and died on her 60th birthday in 2001. The biennial Professor Darshan Ranganathan Memorial Lecture, which is to be delivered by a women scientist who has made outstanding contributions in any field of science and technology, was established in her memory by her husband in 2001. These three women made many significant contributions to the world and will be remembered by many for a long time. Thank you.
Greetings to one and all present here. We present to you, among the many invisibilized scientists, a few unsung heroes of science.
Biba Chaudhary, someone who could have had the honor of being awarded the Nobel Prize not once but twice. Destiny, however, had something else in mind.
We now present to you an unsung hero of particle physics, Biba Chaudhary. This project is presented to you by our group leader Namish of grade 9, Vishnu of grade 8, and I, Kashvi of grade 8. Born in Kolkata 1913, Biba Chaudhary studied physics at Raja Bazar Science College of Calcutta University.
Biba helped in the discovery of mesons with Dr. D.M. Bose. Mesons are subatomic particles which serve as a tool for studying the properties and interactions of quarks, which are fundamental particles that combine to form protons and neutrons. They were unable to carry out further research due to lack of resources during World War II. She later went on to work in the lab of Dr. Blackett in the UK and pursued her PhD. Her thesis revolved around cosmic rays.
She returned to India after her PhD and now worked at the Tata Institute of Fundamental Research, TIFR. Dr. Biba joined as a research fellow in an experimental physics group working on cloud chambers. She devised new methods to observe particles and their properties. She later joined Physical Research Laboratory, PRL, and was involved in the Kolar Goldfield experiments. They used ingeniously developed subatomic detectors placed 700 feet underground, which worked in conjunction with the extensive air shower array of TIFR to conduct experiments.
Reva, Agastya, and group leader Arman will present to you the success story of yet another woman who broke all barriers of discrimination against her and emerged as one of the most successful women in her field. May Carroll Jemison, the first African American female astronaut. Born on October 17, 1956, in Alabama, Jemison was the youngest of her three siblings.
She faced discrimination not only based on her ethnicity but also gender. On September 12, 1992, Jemison flew into space with 6 other astronauts aboard the Endeavour, becoming the first African American woman in space.
She spent a considerable amount of time in her school library reading about all aspects of science, especially astronomy. She entered Stanford University on a National Achievement Scholarship and received a Bachelor of Science in Chemical Engineering. Upon graduation, she entered Cornell University Medical College and during her years there, found time to expand her horizons by studying in Cuba and Kenya and also working at a Cambodian refugee camp in Thailand.
In recognition of her accomplishments, Jemison has received a number of accolades, including several honorary doctorates.
We then present to you Maria Telks, popularly known as Sun Queen Mary, due to her long association with solar. Maria Telks was a Hungarian American biophysicist, scientist, and inventor. This project is presented to you by group leader Malvika of grade 9, Abhinav of grade 8, and Millie of grade 8.
Born in Budapest, Hungary in 1900, Maria attended elementary and high school in Budapest. She then studied at the University of Budapest, graduating with a BA. in physical chemistry in 1920 and a PhD in 1924. When she later moved to the United States, she was hired to work at the Cleveland Clinic Foundation to investigate the energy produced by living organisms. There, she invented a photoelectric mechanism that could record brain waves and also worked to write a book called The Phenomenon of Life.
Telks later worked as a biophysicist in the United States and was involved in solar energy research at MIT. During World War II, the United States government, noting Telk's expertise, recruited her to serve as a civilian advisor to the Office of Scientific Research and Development, OSRD. There, she developed a solar powered water desalination machine. It came to be one of her most notable inventions because it helped soldiers get clean water in difficult situations and also helped solve water problems in the US Virgin Islands. In 1948, she started working on the Dover Sun House. The system was designed so that a special salt would melt in the sun, trap the heat, and then release it once it cooled and hardened.
In addition to this, she received a grant by the Ford Foundation of $45,000 to develop a solar-powered oven so people who lack the technology around the world be able to heat things. It was useful for the tribal Indian usage in remote reservations. While she invented the solar oven, she also discovered a better way for farmers to dry their crops using the same technology. Later in 1980, she helped the US Department of Energy to develop and build the first fully solar-powered home. She received multiple awards for her work and over the course of her career earned more than 20 patents.
We invite you to come and explore more about these amazing scientists. Thank you.
Good morning. I, Dhriti Mijar from Grade 8, welcome you to the presentation by Group 7. Let's close our eyes for a moment and imagine a scientist in a lab. Most probably, you pictured a man as the scientist. But we all know that there have been many equally amazing and significant contributions by women scientists as well. Why is it so important that women join science fields? Well, science holds the key to solving many problems of the world, like hunger, disease, and waste, and it is essential that the best brains, whether male or female, contribute to solving them. Just like mom and dad take decisions at home together, we need a female perspective on the problems we face. Our country, India, is relatively well placed in this aspect. We have the highest number of women graduates in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, or STEM. As many as 43% of Indians who graduate in STEM are women. India is also an exception in a related area where it is said that as many as 1 in 3 research papers published is written by a female author. The idea behind celebrating National Science Day is to show our appreciation to the rock stars in the field of science and ensure equal participation and involvement of women in science. The members of Group 7 include Siddharth Srijit, Anshul Goyal, Rudra Pandit, Sia Sharma, Sonakshi Agarwal, Vartika Singhania, Natanya Ashok Kumar, Saloni Gupta, Veda Pratap, and Dhriti Mijar, who have researched on the scientists,
Elizabeth K. Britton, Maryam Mirza Khani, and Soumya Swaminathan Yadav. A brief introduction to these scientists. Elizabeth G. K. Britton is an American bryologist, educator, and one of the founding leaders of the New York Botanical Garden, the Sullivan Moss Society, and the Wildflower Preservation Society of America. She has published more than 340 scientific papers and was the editor of the Bulletin of the Torrey Botanical Club. She has 15 species and one moss genus, Bryobritania, named after her. She was an activist for protection of wildflowers, inspiring local chapter activities and the passage of legislation. Elizabeth Britton made major contributions to the literature of mosses, publishing 170 papers in that field. Maryam Mirza Khani was a brilliant Iranian mathematician. She developed an interest in the field of mathematics at a very young age and aspired to be a mathematician ever since. She overcame many difficulties early in her life and participated in the International Maths Olympiad, becoming the first woman to win a gold medal. She contributed to the field of geodesics and module of Riemann surfaces in mathematics. Soumya Swaminathan Yadav is known for her research on tuberculosis. She decided to research on it as it was a growing problem in both adults and children. She, along with her colleagues, were the first ones to scale up the use of molecular diagnosis. She was also a part of the TB Zero City project, which aimed to create islands of elimination. She still continues to work in weekly briefings on the COVID-19 during the pandemic. We thank our teachers Priya ma'am and Reshma ma'am for guiding us through this journey of research. Thank you.
Greetings of the day. I, Issa Mary, and my friend Vedika Ramakrishnan warmly welcome you all on the behalf of our booth to commemorate the National Science Day. The year 2020 was not an ordinary year for us. The pandemic imposed a radical switch in our lives. However, we were able to overcome this and put together a virtual yet comprehensive National Science Day event. We are a part of Booth 8, and the name of our booth is Her Story, India's Firebirds. We are a group of 11 members showcasing the lives of 4 incredible Indian women in the field of science. Now Vedika will take us through the upcoming presentations from our fellow boothmates.
Thank you, Issa. The firebirds we will be showcasing today are Dr. Aditi Pant, who is the first Indian woman to have visited Antarctica, by Manas and Krish from grade 8. Dr. Tessie Thomas, the Missile Woman of India, by Issa Mary, Advait and Ritvik from grade 8. Dr. Janaki Ammal is the mother of modern botany in India, by Tejas from grade 9 and Ishita and Kushi from grade 8. And finally, Dr. Indira Hinduja, who delivered India's first gift baby, by Tahira from grade 9 and Ananya and I from grade 8. Sit back, relax, and encourage us while we present.
Good morning. I am Naisa from grade 8, Gunjur campus, and my team Awesome Discoveries, group number 9. We are in total 11 students. Today, we are talking about 3 renowned scientists, Rita Levi-Montalcini, Anita Roberts, and Barbara McClintock. Rita Levi-Montalcini. Rita lived for 103 years from 1909 to 2012. She was an Italian neurobiologist and received the Nobel Prize for her discovery on NGF or nerve growth factor. These help in understanding medical problems like dementia and tumor. Shreya, Kavin, Anna, and me, Naisa, will be taking you through the life of Rita Levi Montalcini. Anita Roberts. Anita lived for 64 years, from 1942 to 2006. She is an American cytogenetist and she received the Nobel Prize because she is the one who discovered TGF beta. TGF beta is found in all the tissues, mainly in bones, lungs. It has a major role in immune function. Anita Roberts found the role of TGF beta for curing the cancer cells. Anish, Anshul, and Prerna will be sharing more details on her. Barbara McClintock. Barbara lived for 90 years from 1902 to 1992. She is an American molecular biologist and was known for her work in the genetic structure of maize. She also discovered jumping genes, which plays a very important role in evolution. These jumping genes can move from one place to another, so can cause diseases. Pavitra, Sanvi, and Shreyas Sai Arvind will be talking about her. Hopefully, you all enjoy our presentations.
Nothing in life is to be feared. It is only to be understood. Now is the time to understand more so that we may fear less. Good morning to one and all present here. We are the students of the Booth 10 Illusion. Today we will be speaking about three women scientists whose contributions have brought remarkable changes in our world. The first group of our booth has chosen Rosalind Franklin as their scientist to research, and they will explain her amazing discovery of DNA. She was a chemist and soon became an expert at X-ray diffraction. Her initial contribution was on the study of the molecular structure of the tobacco mosaic virus. Because of her inquisitive and curious mind, she discovered DNA at the age of 33. Even though Rosalind Franklin and her student Raymond Gosling made the discoveries together, the credit was given to colleagues Watson, Crick, and Wilkins, who received the Nobel Prize for her discovery of DNA. Her discovery of DNA helps us in genetic engineering these days. Evelyn Martin, Lipi Bhattacharya, Anya Mitra, and Katragadda Jairam will take you through Rosalind's contributions to science. The second group of our booth has chosen Ada Yonath as their scientist who is best known for her work on the structure of the ribosomes. Ribosomes consist of hundreds of thousands of atoms. Ada Yonath began a project of mapping the structure of ribosomes. She did this using X-ray crystallography. Among other applications, the structure of ribosomes has been important in the production of antibiotics. She developed techniques which are still used in laboratories around the world. She is known for the cryobiocrystallography method. For her work in making images of ribosomes, she won a Nobel Prize in chemistry. Yonath led a research team at the Max Planck Institute for 18 years. Arishi Puri, Anahita Singh, and Mahi Sangal will tell you all about Ada Yonath and ribosomes. The third group of our booth has chosen Marie Curie as their scientist, and they will tell you about her discovery of radium and polonium. Marie Curie was a French physicist and chemist who conducted research on radioactivity. She was fascinated by the rays discovered by fellow scientists. She discovered two new elements, radium and polonium, along with her husband, Pierre Curie, while examining a material called pitchblende. Her discovery paved way for radiation therapy. For her discovery, she became the first woman to receive the Nobel Prize and also the first person to receive two Nobel Prizes. Abhinav Chawli, Krish Ramanathan, Suryagayatri Vijay, and Rishi Pangaluri will be talking about Marie Curie's research on radioactivity. The challenges faced by these scientists center not only on deprived economic situation, but also on social stereotyping. We faced isolation from colleagues and were deprived of privileges enjoyed by men in their field. The life and contributions of these women scientists tell us that women can play a pivotal role in the progress of the world. Thank you.
Mathematics may not teach us how to add love or minus hate, but it gives us every reason to hope that every problem has a solution. Good morning, one and all present here. I am Ruthvi from Class 8C and wish you all a very happy National Science Day. This year, we all have chosen women mathematicians as our topic for celebrating science. Women don't end up holding tenured positions in the hard sciences and mathematics at that time. But still, there are many who have created footprints in maths and influenced today's world. We all are not aware of women achievements in the mathematical field, which is dominated by the males. Today, let us throw some light on these supernatural women who have changed a lot in our day to day lives. In our booth, Queen of Mathematics, we have Mayank, Aditya, and Akash presenting Emmy Noether. Emmy Noether was a German mathematician who discovered the Noether's theorem. The Noether's theorem is important both because of the insight it gives into conservation of laws. Pranav and Navmi will talk about Karen Uhlenbeck. Karen Uhlenbeck is an American mathematician and the founder of modern geometrical analysis. And she also founded the gauge theory. The gauge theory in mathematics is typically concerned with the study of gauge theoretic equations. These equations are often physically meaningful, corresponding to important concepts in quantum field theory or string theory, but also have important mathematical significance. Uhlenbeck is not just a respected mathematician, but she also encouraged young women to enter this field. She co-founded the Women and Mathematics, an annual program at the Institute for Advanced Study at Princeton University that recruits and encourages women to lead mathematics research. Arushi and Harini will now present on Ada Lovelace. Ada Lovelace discovered that a computer could follow a sequence of instructions, that is, a program. The analytical engine was to be a general purpose, fully program controlled automatic machine digital computer. It would be able to perform any calculation set before it. Now, Mary Cartwright will be presented by Ruthvi, Sachi, and Kirtana. Dame Mary Cartwright was a British mathematician who invented the chaos theory. The chaos theory has wide-ranging applications from weather predictions and market research to crowd management and heartbeat inequalities. Fractals form an integral part of chaos theory and prove that it is possible to generate complex real-life patterns mathematically. I'm sure all of you will have an amazing experience learning about how women were strong and how they changed the earth. Happy National Science Day!
Good morning, one and all present here, and wish you all a very happy National Science Day. This year, the topic for our Science Day is Women Scientists. Scientists are likely to be viewed as a young male more favorably than a woman with the same qualification. In olden days, a woman going to school was only a difficult task. Only a very few were natural talented and their families supported them. Women in India face several challenges in moving up the academic and administrative ladder due to the systemic barriers and cultural factors. But still, there are many women scientists who have brought a change in our life. Example, Ada Lovelace, who is the first computer programmer, Marie Curie, who invented X-rays, Janaki Ammal, who was an Indian botanist, and many more. Professor Rohini Godbole.
Professor Godbole is an Indian physicist and academic. She is a professor at the Center for High Energy Physics. She is also an avid supporter of women pursuing careers in science and technology. She also edited the book Leelavathee's Daughter, who is our honorable guest for today. Governments have taken certain policies to improve the level of women in our society. In our booth, we have Adya and Chayoni who have worked on Professor Rohini's book Leelavathee's Daughter. We have Nikita and Aryaman who worked on Karnataka state programs to integrate women and science. We have Man Mehta who worked on different types of schemes such as the DST. The objective of DST scheme is to enable industries and establishments to partner with the government and private TIS for conducting training programs under high employability courses so as to fulfill their skilled manpower requirements. We also have Jupi Datta who will tell us about the direct benefit transfer DBT schemes. Direct benefit transfer or DBT is an attempt to change the mechanism of transferring subsidies launched by the government of India. Fahad and Godson on Vigyan Jyoti scheme. It also offers exposure for girl students from rural backgrounds to help to plan their journey from school to a job of their choice in the field of science. We have so many children who have worked on these scientists, and I am sure after learning about them, we all will understand women power. On this Science Day, let us bow our heads to these scientists. Without them, we might have not traveled this far in science. As Louis Pasteur said, science knows no country because knowledge belongs to humanity and the torch which illuminates the world. Thank you.
Having launched this chapter of Women and Science, we invite you to explore and gain insights on what has been and is to be in the world of science using the website link that has been shared with you. We would like to express our deep gratitude to Dr. Lavakare and Professor Rohini Godbole for their mentorship. As Isaac Newton said, if we can see ahead, it is only because we are standing on the shoulders of such giants. Thank you, teachers, for your relentless encouragement and guidance. We could not have succeeded without your support. Thank you, Shanti ma'am, for providing us with this unique opportunity to work with the best scientific minds in the country. We're indebted to you. A special thanks to all the students who enthusiastically participated in this event. The future belongs to you. May you continue to explore and question all that is around you.